Greetings, my fellow Americans. This is your president and future congressman speaking, Samuel Ronan, and today is Worldwide Wednesdays. We are halfway through the week, and I wish I could say we were halfway through the slog of nonsense that has been going on across the globe, but that is not true. Because with each new passing day is a new rude awakening on how far in dystopian we can go as a people. So, we will be covering, my bad hair day. No, we will be covering global events, especially things like the Epstein files and how the only arrests that have so far been made are in the UK. Not America. Nowhere else so far, but just literally not America, where literally a quarter of our cabinet is in the files, including the president. We'll also be talking about other issues, of course, like Israel, among other things. So there's definitely a lot to cover today. So, good news. I don't know how much I'm allowed to talk about it, even though I did just send a bunch of press releases to the newspapers. But yesterday I crashed out because the Republican Party was trying to undermine my candidacy by getting me thrown off the ballot for being a fake Republican. Well, turns out I finally got some legal help and advice, and they looked over the complaint and said, not only is this bullshit and like not relevant to anything whatsoever, they also didn't sign the form. Meaning it might just get dismissed out of hand, which means we're going to be able to talk about a lawsuit here soon. Assuming it gets dismissed, whether it gets dismissed because of the motion or once we show up on the meeting and then it gets thrown out because it's not relevant, either which way. Looking forward to it, as should you. All right. Hello, Anna. I think these seem pretty, like they take up a lot of space. I kind of want to, can I not grab it here? What the hell? I feel like some of these are a bit too big. It's just taking up way too much space. I feel what's the word? Claustrophobic. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. All right. So let's get started with the weather, because nothing says political streaming like the weather.
We begin today's show looking at this week's historic bomb cyclone blizzard that blanketed states with snow. From Maryland to Massachusetts and Providence, Rhode Island, more than 37 inches of snow fell, setting a new record.
Okay, so, I mean, we got a foot of snow 3 weeks ago, and that was bad enough. It took forever to melt, right? I don't even want to imagine 37 inches of snow. 3 feet! I think that's like this big. Wait, do I have my tape measure here still? Oh my god, nope, never mind. That was way bigger. So what did I do? I said this big, right? Wrong! It's this big. It's not even fitting on the screen. There we go. This is 37 inches of snow. I'm 6 feet tall. We can't even accurately convey how big this is in the little screen. Like, look, you can see it, and bam. You can see it, and the top. Snow. Snow. This much snow. That is, no. No, thank you there, folks.
For the city. Climate science.
Oh, and for anybody that's going to be cheeky, why does he have a tape measure at his desk in the Oval Office? It's for these kinds of reasons, so we can get accurate measurements. Because I was in metrology, and I take proper measurements seriously.
Scientists have long warned that climate change.
Oh my God, look at this. It's like a damn near, like, hurricane. Oh my God. That's a cold hurricane right there. Whoops.
Will cause more intense and more destructive nor'easters.
Yeah, now what's all this shit coming in the left-hand corner here? Is it like, I don't want another with the steel chair. You know, we don't need more bad weather with the steel chair. Coming in from the left. 5'11". You shut your mouth. You shut your. I am 6 foot. It says it on my license. It said it in my DD214. I'm 6 foot.
We're joined in Philadelphia by Michael Mann, Presidential Distinguished Professor in the Department of Earth and Environmental Science at the University of Pennsylvania.
What a man.
Director of Penn Center for...
What a man, this Michael. He's a man's man. See, such a man, he's a scientist. Scientist man. My license says that I'm 5'6". Well, you were probably wearing lifts when you got that picture taken.
For science, sustainability, and the media. His most recent book, Science Under Siege, which he co-wrote with Dr. Peter Hotez. Last year, Professor Mann co-wrote a study titled The Intensification of the Strongest Nor'easters.
Amy, I hope when you have me on your show one of these days that you do a long-winded introduction to what I've done and what I've attempted to do. But seriously, like, we're trying to get to the point here, and it's been like 30 seconds already. Like, wrap it up, and let's get to the guy.
It was published in the Proceedings of the City, Professor Mann. Juan just left on one of the last planes before the bomb cyclone from New York, where a huge event was canceled for a 30th anniversary, and went back to Chicago because here in New York, a state of emergency was declared in the city and in the state by both the mayor and the governor. They were talking about a life-threatening situation. No one was allowed to be on the streets yesterday until noon. Can you talk about what's happening?
Well, yeah. 3 feet of snow. That could kill you. And if it's coming down, it's 3 feet of snow, by the way, in less than 24 hours, right? Because if you accumulate 3 feet of snow over the course of a week, you can deal with it, right? But if it's just falling 3 feet, just... There's the 37 inches. Like, if all of this snow just plummets down within a couple hours, like, that's structural damage. Like, you can't drive through that. You would literally get stuck in the road because you would be accumulating, 6 inches? Let's see, 36 inches in 6 hours, right? So that would be 6 inches of snow per hour. That's a significant snowfall. Definitely dangerous. Absolutely. He's going to explain that. I won't mansplain it to you. Man will mansplain it to you.
How this relates to climate change.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. It's good to be with you. And here in Philly, we saw a fair amount of that snow as well. We got more than a foot. This was a historic bomb cyclone, as we sometimes call them, a nor'easter, which has to do with the fact that these storms are so strong that in one sector of the storm, you actually get winds coming from the east, which is rare for a mid-latitude storm. Now, these storms, unlike most mid-latitude storms, these coastal storms, these nor'easters, feed on the heat of the oceans. Now, we don't think of the oceans as being that warm in the winter, but they're much warmer than the land, and they still contain a substantial amount of heat. And like a hurricane, these storms feed on that heat. That's what leads to their intensification, why they become so strong. This storm was so strong, it actually had an eye-like feature. Now, it's not quite the same as the eye you see in a hurricane, but it's often a measure of just how intense this storm was. It was as strong as measured by the central pressure of the storm, one of the metrics we use, nearly as strong as a Cat 3 hurricane. Jeez. And so, like hurricanes, they feed on the heat of the oceans. That gives them their intensity, and it provides all of that moisture that's available to dump out in record snowfalls.
So here's the thing, right? Global warming, i.e. the warming of our oceans and the melting of our Arctic circles, right, is directly contributing to these storms. And the fact that every bit of the argument, every bit of the, well, global warming's fake, climate change isn't real, if global warming is real, why is it snowing? No, it is snowing as intensely as it is explicitly because of global warming. As land temperatures fall, ocean temperatures are whatever they are, and that difference, that temperature difference, is what causes these storms. That's what causes all storms: barometric pressure and temperature differences. That is the essence of what creates a storm. It's how that is like humidity. is basically unformed clouds. If that kind of tracks, right? And I'm sure Michael Mann, the man, could mansplain it better to everybody. But suffice to say, like, getting hit with these storms, the record snowfall, the extreme temperature changes, like all of these things is climate change, is global warming. Maybe, and I think that's why we tried to rephrase it as climate change, because too many people were like, well, it can't be global warming if it's getting cold. Like, this is exactly why, instead of giving $500 billion to the military, we should be investing $500 billion in our education. Because, like, this is one of those fundamental things that should not be questioned or argued, and is being questioned and argued. Like, climate change should be considered with the same sincerity as gravity. You don't hear people saying, oh, gravity's fake news. Okay, walk off a building then. Go ahead, walk off a building. You think gravity's fake? Walk off a building. Okay? That is how stupid it sounds when people deny climate change, because it's the same principle. It is a fact the climate is changing. And the extreme weather anomalies that we are experiencing since the late 90s is explicitly due to climate change. So yeah, let's continue burning fossil fuels and killing ourselves with extreme weather elements. Just like, if you don't believe in gravity, go ahead and walk off a fucking cliff. All right. So, that was a bit crass on my part. I apologize. Schools were closed for a week in Columbus because of 1 foot of snow. Yeah, I mean, that is true. My own Columbus, Ohio was closed their schools for a week. And I actually was permitted, as I'm running for Congress, right? But I still have a job, which means I still, unfortunately, have to kowtow to a capitalist if I want to be able to eat and run for office, for that matter, or hold these streams. But all that to say, yeah, I worked from home most of that week, but I did go into work like one of those days or something like that. But it's crazy that even with the extreme weather anomalies, most of the time companies or cities will just be like, nah, we're still open for business. It's like, why would you risk it? Why can't you just give people a break and still pay them? Because again, it's not like you weren't going to pay them anyway. It's not like you've already allocated the money for it. I will never understand how companies can just get away with not paying you due to inclement weather or an emergency situation. I just don't, I don't get that. They're already writing off your entire salary for tax purposes, and they look for any reason under the sun to not pay you. All of which is to say, let's get into the UK arresting Lord.
Turning now to the fallout from the Epstein files, Lord Mandelson in the UK has been arrested. Let's go ahead and put this video up here on the screen. You can see the perp walk of him being led from his brick mansion.
That's not much of a perp walk. He's not handcuffed, and they seem to be pretty cordial about it.
You know, in his stately outfit there of what befits a British lord, being led by the Metropolitan Police into a waiting car. Now remember,
he was literally escorted politely to that car.
Remember, the British system is weird, and for some reason they don't just say so-and-so has been arrested, but we do know, C1, let's put that up here on the screen. You can see right here, Lord Mandelson was arrested on suspicion of conduct in public office. A short while ago, the former minister being led from his London home to an unmarked car by police officers. The ex-US ambassador is under investigation over allegations he shared market-sensitive government information with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, and this is actually the part that kills me, is it seems they're arresting and charging these people not for the child crimes, not for the murder, not for the rape, not for the torture or any of the other stuff. No, they're arresting these fuckers because of insider trading, for economic disclosures. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, honestly, I cannot understand why it is so difficult to charge monstrous men who committed monstrous acts with the crimes that it befits them. But no, it's like, they're basically saying, the UK is basically saying, We actually don't care that you raped children or murdered them or ate them or any of that nonsense. We care that you spilled economic secrets to somebody else. How fucking dare you? And that just goes to show, like, when it comes to capitalism, that is what matters most. Not the depravity, not the criminal acts, not even the corruption. It's the fact that you would try and enrich yourself on at the expense of somebody else that was at your level. How dare, and which is crazy because capitalism is all about stepping on other people. But I guess the point is to do it in front of everybody instead of behind the scenes. Like, I don't even fucking know. Because there's how many backdoor dealings happening in trade deals or business mergers or separations or whatever else. I just, the fact that it's revolving around finances, the disclosures, disgusting. Absolutely infuriating.
Epstein while a government minister. He has not yet publicly commented on the matter. But, you know, to say allegedly shared is not even true. Like, he shared it. It's in the file. So
yeah, we see the email.
Right.
The
only defense is it, were you hacked in 2000? Can he pull a Joy Reid and say Russian hackers in 2010 actually sent the email on my behalf of privileged non-public information? Or did you send it, bro? Because I'm pretty sure you sent it. Now, what's even crazier is that's only the tip of the iceberg. Gordon Brown has said he's already shared more information with the current authorities. There could be all kinds of, think about it, Epstein files is just Epstein and his emails. They have access to his real email, so they could subpoena and look at all of their stuff and share it over with the authorities. It could be the tip of the iceberg. If a person's willing to share non-public market information with one person, you really think they've never done it before? Or is this maybe a ring where this happened one time and we just so happened to get the email in this one point? Again, you know, for the British authorities, I don't have any proof of that. I'm only speculating, not even necessarily impugning the character of the great Lord. But, you know.
Oh my God. I gotta admit, he is pretty cheeky on this one. Some people are saying that this may be like what happened with Al Capone. They charged him with tax evasion because it was the easiest charges to prove, but in this case, there's plenty of evidence for the other charges. No, and that's exactly the point. These files are literally a treasure trove of holding some of the worst human beings accountable for their atrocious acts. Like, the Epstein files, but then again, it's just like the Panama Papers that came out, right? The Panama Papers showed that, like, all rich people were skirting the system, and then the only thing that happened was the person who broke it, the journalist, was found murdered a few weeks later. Like, we can't just keep rehashing that the wealthiest and most influential people in the world can get away with whatever atrocities they want. Like, we need a system, and we need people to enforce that system that holds these pieces of shit accountable.
Or when you think about how this has exploded across the world and comparing it here, it's unbelievable. You have now Lord Mandelson and Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew is going to literally lose his line in the British succession, which that's the Prince shit that I'm talking about. Yeah. That's what I want to see. Is if we're going to have the institution, then we got to be like declare his blood unworthy of sitting on the throne. But now you have Lord Mandelson. He might be getting his title stripped. He's going to jail potentially, getting arrested. You have the former Norwegian prime minister. He just tried to commit suicide. Apparently, there was just a report out this morning. I mean,
is that on here? Because I would love to cover that piece of garbage too. The fact that we have, you know, people literally trying to kill themselves, resigning, this, that, and the other, but no arrests in America, whereas across the globe, things are beginning to stir.
You've got multiple of these of Slovakia. You've had that official. Here in the U.S., former governor just got some professional consequence. Peter Attia, by the way, we can give an update. C6, let's put that on the screen. He has he either resigned or he's no longer at CBS News over this correspondence. We have the leaders of Apollo Group, of that major law firm here in Washington. All of these people have stepped down. But all of the accountability in America is in the private sector.
Yeah.
And over there, it's the official governments who are the French authorities.
Well, and there isn't accountability in the private sector. Losing your job isn't accountability. Losing your job, you're still alive and you're not charged with the crimes. You just lost your job. And the people that are losing their jobs are wealthy individuals. So, like, they could literally live the rest of their lives as long as they downsize a little, I guess. If they lived a blue-collar lifestyle on $48,000 a year, like those who make that kind of money. Well, how do I want to phrase this? The middle class lifestyle is between 36 and 60,000 of take home pay, right? That's mortgage, bills, groceries, and usually enough savings to go, enough to save money for whatever it is you want to get, right? With my income, I've been able to live off of between 24,000 and 48,000 throughout my career. And the only reason why it's closer to the 48,000 now is because houses be expensive and bills be expensive, yo. I'm pretty sure it used to be that all my cost of living expenses was under $2,000, and now it's closer to $3,000. And then, of course, we're adding in groceries and everything else. So, like, these rich, influential, private sector schlubs who were in the Epstein files, making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year, could probably live off of the rest of that for the rest of their life if they lived a moderate lifestyle. Okay, you added them at the bottom? All right, cool. So, let's see, we have 25 video. Okay, so I think I can afford to be on this for a little bit.
Authorities. They're reopening the investigation into the suicide of Jean-Luc Brunel and his suspicious death, in addition to raiding the offices of people named in the files. The Macron government being mentioned in the Epstein files actually caused like kind of a political earthquake over there, but here it's like business as usual. And I think that's just what I want to highlight for everybody.
There's 2 points.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I guess we might get to it. But Macron is literally setting the stage for fascism in France. Granted, one could argue that they've kind of had it already, given that he's managed to stay in power, but the foreign minister has not, or the prime minister, whoever his counterpart is, has been going through cycles while he manages to somehow stay in power. And the fact that protesters continue to protest and do everything under the sun except get him out. And now it's being revealed that he was in the files too. Like, it's not looking good.
Points to make about this. Number one, all these various investigations that now have been launched around the world are going to be really important because not just in the case of Mandelson, but in France and other countries around the world where they've actually taken this seriously, you are going to have some sort of discovery process where you're going to see more, where you're going to learn more. So in effect, you'll have more Epstein files that are released as a result of the actions in these various countries. The other thing that I was thinking about is like, it makes me a little bit more sympathetic towards cancel culture because that's literally the only elite accountability that we apparently have in this country. I mean, that's the only mechanism we have. That's the only reason Kathy Rumler or the Pritzker guy or Peter Attia or any of these people are having to face anything. Because we've already been told from the government, we're not going to do any criminal investigation. This is done. We're, closed. We're not releasing any more files. We don't want to talk about it anymore. We don't think there's anything to investigate here. We don't think there's anything to prosecute.
Well, and that's the crazy thing too, because the Congress, the whole Congress passed legislation stating you will release all the files and you will not redact the names of the perpetrators, but you will redact the names of the victims. And from what few files were released, it was the exact opposite redaction scheme. And there are still millions of files plus gigabytes, terabytes worth of footage and video that hasn't been, or footage and photographs that haven't been released. Now, granted, it's not like I exactly want to watch these things or look at these things. I try to skip past it every time it comes up on our screen anyway. But the fact that the government is saying, Trump, his administration is saying, and now we're done with it, but Congress is literally saying, okay, I guess that's that then. No. No. Like, where are the consequences? Where's the arrests? Where's the charges? This is very credible. Other countries definitely seem to think it's credible. Why is it that America doesn't? Like, we obviously understand why they don't want to prosecute, because everybody's going to jail. The entire system will come crashing down. Good. That's exactly what needs to happen. It's one of the many reasons I am running for Congress, so that we can get some accountability. Unbelievable. That's the funny thing about Breaking Point. Sager is the right-winger, but he's charismatic. Ryan is the more leftist, and I agree with him. He's a great journalist, but he is so boring. Well, it's a good thing I'm a right-winger who's also charismatic. You know, maybe that's why I was born to be a Republican. The charisma.
Here, within our own government, let alone, among any other business leaders. We are moving on, nothing to see here. So essentially, our only real recourse is through shame and pressure of various corporate entities to try to make people who are implicated lose their jobs. That's all this public has. So you can see why there has been in the past, and I think currently within the context of the Epstein files, why there has been such a frenzy around these type of pressure campaigns, because there's no hope that there's going to be any sort of criminal justice account.
And I know we're on Worldwide Wednesday and we're talking about what's happening in America because all roads lead back to Rome. So we'll go ahead and move on from this story, but suffice to say, this scandal, this Epstein scandal, is probably going to define the first part of this century. There is no... The Epstein files being what they are, how disgusting they are, how far-reaching they have been, how they have literally defined multiple generations, not just the wars, not just the geopolitical stuff, diplomatic relations, but the war on terror, 9/11. Nothing from 9/11 has been released, by the way. None of the files from that era have been released. I wonder why, right? The implications that Israel is blackmailing world leaders at scale, and the fact that our administration is being blackmailed by Israel, is being controlled by them, and is being manipulated in real time by them. That's not bad enough. But it's also our social, cultural phenomena, right? The fact that beauty standards have been tied towards making women look like girls for decades, and it can be directly, not tangentially. The Epstein files reveal that this was a deliberate effort by members of the Epstein clan to normalize pedophilia by making women adhere to that standard of looking like a teenage girl. It's the Epstein files also promoted right-wing extremism across the globe and transphobia across the globe. These people are responsible for social engineering and geopolitical engineering, as well as blackmailing world leaders, industrialists, and the whole nine yards. The sheer amount of fuckery and impact that these Epstein Kabbalists have has literally defined the first quarter of this century. And it allegedly even goes back into the 90s or even the 80s, right? So, the ramifications, right? Maybe not the actual cabal itself, but the point here that I'm trying to make is this revelation of what revelations it's going to be studied in histories, and at some point in the future we're going to know everything about the files and who all was involved and how bad it really was. There will be a point in time where that is finally revealed. It might very well be after everyone that's in them is dead. Preferably not. Hopefully I get into the office of the presidency beforehand and I make quick work of it. But, maybe I get assassinated beforehand. Suffice to say, these files and the people within them are historic. This is an historic moment that we are living through in horror across the globe. Humanity committed these atrocities, shifted the narrative for decades, and then spent at least a year, going on 2, of covering it up to protect these monsters. There has never been a global effort to cover up a conspiracy like this before. Never. At no point in time in history has there been a global effort, and not within one empire or one country, a global, not just region, global effort And I can't think of any incident in history where regions conspired, multiple countries conspired to cover things up. Not once. I cannot think of anything. Like, we can talk about the Dark Ages being a dark point in human history. We can. But it wasn't a cabal coming together to cover up heinous crimes for 1,000 years. It was theocracy for 1,000 years in Europe. And you know what? It was only Europe that suffered through the Dark Ages because everybody else was like, wow, those white people are fucked up. We're going to continue not doing that. Right? So these atrocities are of such proportion that it is defining human history. It is truly defining the steps humanity is taking, presently taking, mind you. Because again, the rise of right-wing extremism over the course of the past 30 years is why we have Trump, is why we have fascists in power in Japan, the attempted coup in South Korea, Malay in Argentina, and on all the other dictators, despots, and authoritarians who have risen up in the course of time because of the normalization of right-wing authoritarianism is literally can be laid at the feet of Epstein, the Epstein cabal. And then the anti-transphobia nonsense, the anti-trans rhetoric that has taken a lot of the world, I won't say all the world, but a lot of the world by storm, is also directly in line with what they tried to perpetuate, or what they initiated. They created that storm because they wanted to prey on the vulnerable people. So it is not an exaggeration to say that Epstein and clients literally drove human history for decades, and the ramifications of that cannot be understood for generations to come. Like, it'll be generations from now before we realize just how off skew this moment in history threw us. So, just emphasizing, I suppose.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump's continuing to threaten to attack Iran as the U.S. expands its massive military presence in the Middle East. On Thursday, Trump said he would give Iran 10 to 15 days to reach a new nuclear deal.
They cannot continue to threaten the stability.
Iran has amassed an immense strike force of aircraft and warships and the largest military buildup in the region since the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Earlier this week, the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, passed through the Strait of Gibraltar on its way to join the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Persian Gulf. The USS Gerald Ford had been stationed in the Caribbean when the U.S. attacked Venezuela and abducted its president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife. Trump's threats to attack Iran came during the inaugural meeting of the so-called Board of Peace, Trump's new initiative to create an alternative to the UN. On Tuesday, U.S. and Iranian negotiators held indirect talks in Geneva and left without a clear resolution. Iran has long maintained that its nuclear program is solely for civilian purposes. To talk about all of this and more, we're joined by Jeremy Scahill, co-founder of Dropsite News. His latest...
I'm surprised she didn't mention that the new aircraft carrier, the one that came from the Caribbean and is now circumnavigating the globe to Iran, is suffering some shitty consequences. We're definitely covering that tomorrow, let me tell you.
Peace. This is not a dress rehearsal. U.S. engaged in massive military buildup as threat to bomb Iran grows. Jeremy, lay out your findings.
Well, Amy, what I've been hearing from sources is that Donald Trump has been running around for some time saying that he wants to be known as the American president that forever ended the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And he's even, I'm told by sources, been saying that he wants to complete this before the midterm elections. And so part of what we've seen is that
he wants to be remembered as the president who ended the Islamic Revolution. The same Islamic Revolution that was carried out by the CIA after they fucking toppled their democratic leaders, which gave rise to the Islamic Revolution in the first place. Like, are you fucking serious? I want to be remembered as the president that fixed U.S. foreign policy by committing the same atrocities that brought us to where we are today. Like, that's not how that fucking works. That's just, it's not. And, okay.
You know, Trump, who ripped up the original nuclear agreement with Iran that was signed in 2015 under President Obama, is that he has used the veneer of engaging in negotiations with Iran as cover to launch more strikes. That was the case last June when the United States and Israel waged a 12-day massive bombing campaign that killed more than 1,000 Iranians. Now we're in the process of Trump saying, I was told a couple of days ago that Trump had made clear to the Iranians that they had 2 weeks to come back with what amounted to a pretty sweeping capitulation to his demands. The Iranian foreign minister this morning said that the U.S. has not formally demanded zero enrichment. But what I understand is that the Iranians have been told that the issue of their ballistic missile supply and reducing it dramatically has to be on the table, and also their support for regional resistance movements. Remember, Iran is the only actual nation state, with the exception of Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen, that has launched any sort of attacks against Israel in response to the genocide in Gaza. The Israelis have been empowered by both President Biden when he was in office and Donald Trump to wage these sweeping wars across the Middle East. And so what we're looking at right now is the Trump strategy is either we force them into capitulation and we make a deal or that is entirely on Trump's terms, and if they make that kind of a deal, that would eliminate large capacity of the ballistic missile system, the Iranians basically don't have any deterrence anymore. And so I'm told that part of Trump's calculation is, look, if we get them to do that, they don't really have a state anymore, and their days are numbered because it would make them much more susceptible to Israeli attack, not to mention American attack. But if...
Okay, so let's summarize. Trump wants to get his deal. Israel wants to be the supreme power of the Middle East. The plan for Iran is to give up all of its defensive capability so that it could then become vulnerable to U.S. and Israeli invasion, which is the reason why they have this capability in the first place, to prevent that shit from happening. And the threat is either you lay down your weapons so we can invade you with less casualties on our side, or we will invade you and do it anyway. Exactly how does that serve any purpose whatsoever other than sending American lives to their deaths, destroying a country that we have no reason to hate on behalf of an enemy who is blackmailing leaders in our country to do this for their benefit? Israel is the only country that benefits from a weakened America and a weakened Iran. So why the fuck are we even debating this?
If the Iranians, say that their red lines are essentially their self-defense, which is their ballistic missile and drone program, then the United States is poised to attack. There's two potential scenarios here. One could be that we see some form of initial limited scale attack that the United States may think would, quote unquote, soften the Iranians. And if they don't come back with capitulation, then you wage a much wider war. I'm told by sources who are in direct contact with military planners and others that in the bigger picture, the U.S. is looking at two possible scenarios. One would be the Libya scenario, where you have U.S. air power that is used to enact regime change, and then you allow chaos and civil war to brew on the ground. Or you have something that they're comparing to a Venezuela scenario. It doesn't mean that they would try to kidnap Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, or senior Iranian officials. It means that they would try to decapitate the leadership and then make some sort of a deal with lower echelons within the Iranian state, akin to what's happening now in Venezuela, where you have American oil companies coming in and the Venezuelan authorities doing essentially whatever Marco Rubio and Donald Trump order them to do. At the same time, I've been told by military experts who spent decades working in the Pentagon that there's a spirit of delusion that has just taken hold in the.
Yeah, I was about to say, there's a distinct difference between Venezuela, that did not have a large army to begin with, or a large population to begin with, or allies in the region that would back them up, versus Iran, which has been a regional power for decades and has the military capability of resisting the United States with a population of 80 million. Iran is not going to simply be walked all over. It's just not going to happen. It's just that's not going to happen, right? So to suggest that a light strike against Iran is going to do anything other than reinforce their commitment to resist is absolute batshit insane. And I'm glad he brought it up. There is delusion in the Pentagon. There's delusion in this administration. If you truly believe, as an American citizen, that you can attack Iran, which has been leading the cry of death to America, resist the empire, and aiding terrorist organizations and other Islamic Arab countries in the region to resisting American imperialism and influence, if you think that that country is going to give an inch just because we shot them and bombed a few of their cities and killed a few of their people, you're out of your fucking minds. They will fight us to the death, to the last man, woman, and child. They have a vested interest in fighting to the death, down to the last man, woman, and child, because whether America invades Iran and then subjugates them, they will be turned into the next Gaza, or what happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, which, as everybody knows, devastated both countries economically, in the region, militarily. They're still rebuilding to this day, and they are still dealing with terrorist groups in those countries. And Israel has shown a proclivity for genocide and ethnic cleansing. And they have been very open and vocal about wanting Iran out of the picture completely so that they can build greater Israel. So, Iran is literally facing an existential crisis. Literally an existential crisis. Not that the Iranians want to fight. They don't. But the choices are clear. Either fight and potentially die, or surrender and definitely die slowly along years of occupation. So, to suggest otherwise or think otherwise is delusion.
Administration, that a lot of the decisions being made now are not tactical decisions. They have to do with politics and Donald Trump's ego and wanting to be known as the man who forever smashed the Islamic Revolution. So
this is going to be Vietnam all over again. Oh no, this is going to be the global war on terror all over again. Like, waging wars for political reasons never, ever play out the way that they were intended to. All it does is drain our resources, kill our sons and daughters, and make us look like the tyrant scum that the rest of the world thinks that we are.
There's no doubt about it. The U.S. is on the verge of some form of military action. It remains possible that the Iranians are going to try to thread the needle. The foreign minister and others say that they're working on a draft to come back to what the U.S. demanded in Geneva and in Oman before that. But it's a very dire situation. And if the U.S. does launch a larger scale attack, I'm told that probably what they would try to do is a blitzkrieg to knock out as much of Iran's.
Yeah, with an emphasis on the Nazi term, by the way, because we're fascists being led by a racist scumbag ordering military actions when he himself never served. Yes, blitzkrieg seems to be accurate.
Offensive military capability as possible alongside its air defenses, hit command and control centers, try to blow up naval assets. And then the question becomes, what kind of response can the Iranians offer? In the past, they've calibrated their strikes. They've intentionally not tried to kill large numbers of American troops. They showed a capacity to defeat Iron Dome in Israel. Their hypersonic missiles certainly are advanced and they're very strong. They do have an ability at this moment to do significant damage to Israel if they want to, and also to attack oil infrastructure, potentially close the Strait of Hormuz. But all of that sort of assumes that the Iranian missile capability is not severely damaged in an opening massive U.S. strike. And that's a very big wild card here. The Iranians said they're not going to calibrate anymore. They're not going to do backdoor choreography if the U.S. attacks. They view it as an existential war for the Islamic Revolution.
Huh. What did I just fucking say? The Iranians view this as an existential crisis. I said that. I said that, right? I said that. Hey, let's play that back, right? No, I said that. And so this folks, okay, listen. I was a card-carrying member of the United States Air Force, right? I am not making this shit up when I say the last thing any veteran wants, the last thing any soldier wants is open war. It is the last thing. Yes, everybody who serves wants to die in a blaze of glory, but they don't necessarily want to fight. They don't want to have to fight if they don't have to, right? But if they're going to fight, blaze of glory, right? And I'm telling you right now, we were drug into a 20-year slugfest with Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember that those two countries surrounded Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Oh, I guess my thing is. So Afghanistan, which is about the size of France, and Iraq, which is about the size of Spain, right? We were quagmired for 20 years in countries that small with significantly less military capability. Iran together is twice, 3 times the size of Afghanistan and Iraq put together. Why isn't it highlighting this time? Whatever. And again, a much higher military or population, much larger and more advanced military, and China and Russia have been sending assets to them as well. So there is a de facto access alignment there, right? The only countries in the region that compare in power and strength would be Saudi Arabia. Maybe Turkey. Oh wait, there's Russia. Russia is literally all the way down to the Caspian Sea. Holy shit. Russia is such a big fucking country. My God. So, all I'm getting at is there is not a world. There is, again, Russian trade can get straight into Iran from the Caspian Sea all day long. All day long. And there is nothing that can be done to stop it because right now Ukraine's a buffer and is being undermined by Russia, right? So it's not like Europe can even go through the Black Sea because they're not allies with Georgia. They're not allies with Armenia or Azerbaijan. They are with Turkey. So you can maybe get supplies through the Black Sea to Turkey and then what? Into Iran? Well, if Iran's fighting against Turkey and Turkey's not inclined to fight Iran, you're cut off entirely from this. There is no stopping Russia from helping Iran, is what I'm getting at. And Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, which is this thing right here. That's all Iran all day long. And we're in the Persian Gulf. And we did it against Iraq and in Kuwait in the 90s, and we did it again for 20 years in 2003, right? And we didn't fuck with Iran because we would have gotten, if not, maybe we wouldn't have lost, but we would not have come out of that smelling like daisies. That is for damn fucking certain. And there's a reason why we never attacked Iran. There is a reason why we did CIA shit in Iran. There is a reason why we never used military force. So, to suggest that Iran, who has witnessed the destruction of Afghanistan and Iraq, basically the occupation of Qatar, and what we did to Kuwait, if we turn our missiles and weapons against Iran, they will fight to the death because they do see it as an existential crisis because functionally that's what they're seeing. And the worst part is, where's Israel? Where's Israel on this map? Where's Israel? Right? It's this small thing right here. This little sliver of land, which is nowhere close to Iran, is forcing this country, which is, again, an entire ocean away, this way, and even more so this way. In fact, if it went from the Caribbean, which would have been faster? Caribbean down the South Africa, or yeah, down the Southern Africa and then into there? Or would it have been Caribbean through no, see, because I don't know that there's a canal big enough to take warships through here. So yeah, we went from the Caribbean Sea. We probably sailed around the Horn of Africa, but we might have gone through all this. I don't know. Suffice to say, why are we, America, dealing with Iran because of itty-bitty fucking Israel, which is illegally occupying Palestine? Let's be clear. Israel should be reading Palestine. But instead, it's Israel because colonizers. And by the way, the Gaza Strip, Gaza, all of this is where the genocide took place for the past 2 years. So, 2 million people lived here. And now, significantly less do. And none of this is actually livable. None of it. Despite having all these coasts, because there's a blockade happening right here. Like, when you see this on a map, it makes it all the more galling that there was so much ordnance dropped here that it is actually depleting our weapons stockpile. We dropped, through Israel, we dropped so many bombs in Gaza that we diminished our stockpile. And now, and that's just Gaza. Gaza is this little sliver right there. You can barely even see it from my mouse. We dropped all that ordnance to turn that into a parking lot. And we're going to go after Iran now? We wasted trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trillions of dollars. Hundreds of tanks, hundreds of thousands of jeeps and helicopters and everything else. In these much smaller countries. And we're going to go after Iran? I don't see it. I really don't fucking see it.
And the existence of the independence of Iran's state.
Jeremy, you talked about political reasons that could be why President Trump is ramping up against Iran right now. I mean, could that have to do, interestingly enough, with Epstein? You have the former prince who's been arrested. Trump cannot, no matter how hard he tries, get this.
Is the war in Iran on behalf of Israel also because of Epstein? Great question.
Off the front pages of the newspapers in the United States, even though co-conspirators and he himself are not being gone after by the Justice Department, according to the Attorney General, but Britain is doing it, that no matter what he does, this is extremely threatening. And so what we saw over the New Year's is President Trump moving that USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier, next to Venezuela. This was when the headlines were dominated in December by Epstein. And he attacks and abducts the Venezuelan president. Now he brings this same aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, to join the USS Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the cost of maintaining this armada near Iran. Are you scared that this is what is driving him?
Well, also on that issue of the Gerald Ford, I mean, this is a crew that has been in a heavy rotation. Normally, there would need to be maintenance on that aircraft carrier. There would need to be troop rotation and to send them to the region is a very clear indication that the U.S. Has on the table a very serious intent to strike Iran. When I saw that the Gerald Ford was getting moved from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere and looked at some of the troop rotation and maintenance issues, that's a very ominous sign. But to your broader point about Epstein, the Iranians have started referring to themselves as being at war with the Epstein regime, the kind of coalition of nations that are.
There we go. Epstein regime. Let's fucking go. Epstein regime. That's the only thing we need to refer to as Trump anymore, as the Epstein regime. Because quite frankly, that's exactly what it seems like. I would agree. And for all intents and purposes, that's exactly what it is. No seeming, no hyperbole, no exaggeration. Trump is, we could easily call him the Trump files for how often he's in there and how he is explicitly listed as the vulnerable asset to be the Pied Piper and all this other shit to bring it all together. Jeremy Scahill is a great foreign affairs journalist. That or he has no fucks to give. Because, we've seen great journalists capitulate to the propaganda before.
Amassing alongside Trump right now in their posture in the world, and with Donald Trump himself being one of the main suspects in this entire thing. Certainly the wag the dog scenario is an element here. Donald Trump is at great exposure because of the Epstein files, no matter how many lies he wants to tell or, how often he tries to distract from it. That certainly is a factor here, but I wouldn't underestimate the degree to which you have elements of this administration right now. It's very different in several core ways from Trump 1. You have elements here who are absolutely obsessed with Iran and destroying the Islamic Revolution. That is not something to be understated. And Trump, I'm told, is walking around constantly bringing up that he wants to forever be the president that changed these regimes in the world. We can, you can talk about Cuba in a different program, but that's the vibe right now. It's like the resurrection of the Dulles in the early stages of the CIA worldview that the United States is just going to be toppling regimes around the world. So, while I think.
And look how far, seriously though, let us, Trump is going to be remembered as the toppler of regimes, just like in the good old days when the CIA was toppling regimes. Now look at the world, dealing with the aftermath of those regimes that were toppled because fascists and authoritarians were spun up in their place. Like, the world might very well have been at peace and enjoying a golden era of prosperity if it hadn't been for the US CIA. Honestly, maybe America is the devil land that's outlined here during the end times. Maybe it isn't Israel, ironically. Oh, he's been doing this for decades? It's looking good for decades old. Jesus, did he start when he was 12? Oh, and he was very critical of W and Obama. Okay, very good. He's 52. Shit, if I look half that good at 52, I'll take it. Like, there's barely... I have about as much gray as he does. And I'm 36. And you didn't want to believe him about Obama, but he was correct. His fellow vampire, exactly. So maybe I need to... I don't know, whatever it is you do. But okay, if he's been on the right side of history for decades, then, I'd welcome him into my administration. Hell yeah, let's go.
The Epstein part of it is a convenient element for what Trump is doing. I think they're dead set on trying to change the Iranian regime or force them into a capitulation that would forever weaken the existence of Iran as an independent state.
Didn't President Obama work a nuclear deal with Iran that President Trump pulled out of?
Yeah. Amy, what's incredible, too, is that Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, War Secretary Hegseth, all said after the June strikes that they had completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear program. Let's remember, though, that beginning in late 2003, according to even current U.S. intelligence assessments, Iran had ended its nuclear weapons program. There was a fatwa issued by the supreme leader decades ago that said that it was forbidden to use or possess weapons of mass destruction. Now, you can say, oh, that's just propaganda, that's just lies. But the reality is, if you talk to Iranians, I recently met with a former senior Iranian diplomat who helped to negotiate that 2015 deal. And he said that, what the U.S. is doing right now is actually helping the camp within Iran that says it was a grave mistake that we ended that program. So there's that element to it. But I think what we're looking at right now is that you have this kind of neocon ideology that, despite all of Trump's rhetoric about hating the neocons and saying the Iraq war was a catastrophic mistake, Trump seems dead set on sort of legacy work here and regime change in Iran. And the question here, Amy, is if the United States does attack, and if it's true what the Iranians are saying, that they're not going to calibrate strikes anymore. I was told by one well-connected Iranian that he's heard talk of wanting to kill at least 500 American service members in retaliatory strikes. Donald Trump has never had to endure a mass casualty incident as president of American soldiers or American personnel. And the question then becomes, what does Trump do if the Iranians are able to successfully strike military bases or other areas where there are large numbers of Americans? There's tens of thousands of Americans positioned in the Gulf right now. This is a very, very dangerous scenario that we're facing right now.
So let's bring this home, right? Because I think he's almost done talking too. I mean, I know we're doing the direct talk, but Iran was able to stop Israel's attacks, our missiles. Iran was able to stop U.S. weapons for 12 days straight. And yes, 1,000 casualties. Probably because Israel was attacking civilian centers, which is against the law anyway. Oh, well, it's against the law and all it's fair in love and war. Well, not really, but okay, I get what you're going for, right? Also, that just proves that Israel is, in fact, the bad guy because they are directly attacking civilians. And you shouldn't do that no matter what, whether it's against the rules of engagement or not. Why the fuck are you attacking civilians? That's just despicable. And exactly, there are rules of engagement in war. Suffice to say, Iran has already proven its defensive capabilities, which is why Israel stopped fighting. And like, hey, you know what? Can we stop? And Iran's like, sure, we will allow it. And Israel was like, thank fucking God. Now we can get back to committing genocide in Palestine, right? Except since that point, since that attack, China and Russia have been bolstering Iranian military and defense systems. And Iran has never gone on the offensive. So far as we know, as far as I know, Iran maybe regionally has gone on the offensive, but not against Israel and certainly not against the United States. We don't actually know what they are capable of. And if their weapons defense systems are superior enough, advanced enough, that's the word. If they are advanced enough to stop F-35s, F-22s, our long-range missile systems, and whatever the else fuck we want to throw at them, or at least keep it at bay, that means the blitzkrieg isn't going to work, right? Because the whole point is superiority of land, air, and sea all at once, which is what we had in Iraq, and it's what we had in Afghanistan. Why did we stay in there for so long? Because we were there for their poppy fields and their oil. Let's be very fucking clear. We were there to destabilize the region and steal their natural resources, and we did for 20 years until it became so unpopular that people finally pulled out. Our country finally pulled out. So we've been looking for a war ever since, and we couldn't manufacture one in Latin America. We couldn't manufacture a new one in the Middle East, so now we are going out of our way to do it again. Sure, Trump can claim whatever he wants, but fundamentally we're doing more war because war has always made us lots of money in the past. Surely now will be the same. We have never fought an enemy that was actually capable of fighting back. Not since World War II. And realistically, the Vietnamese, we fought them on their home turf the way they knew how to fight. If we had carpet bombed the forests of Vietnam, we might have been able to win. At great cost, don't get me wrong. we would have been committing eco-terrorism in the process. But fuck it, if you win, you're the good guy, right? My point is, Vietnam was not a powerful country. Korea was not a powerful country, North versus South. Iraq, Afghanistan, they weren't powerful. Venezuela is not a powerful country. Cuba is most certainly not a powerful country. Gaza is occupied, and Palestine is occupied, and they don't even have a military. Trying to think. Kuwait, Qatar, they were not powerful enough to do anything about us being there. Where else did we attack? Let me look at this ye old map here. I'm trying to think. Maybe, yeah, right? Like, so maybe there was like some Panama, Colombia stuff in the 80s, right? Guatemala. Let's see. I don't think... Cambodia. Okay, there was Cambodia. Again, very small country, very weak country in comparison. What else do we got? I think that pretty much sums it up. Maybe a few Eastern Bloc countries here or there. Maybe we had a few things to go on. But never a country that actually had the military and technological might to resist U.S. superiority. Like, seriously, we have not fought an enemy that could actually go toe-to-toe with our weapon systems before. We have always fought with overwhelming advantage. Overwhelming advantage. And in several cases, we still technically lost. We lost in Vietnam, and we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan twice. The Persian Gulf Wars, and then the global war on terror. So, Iran has modern defense capabilities, has modern attack capabilities, has naval capabilities, has air capabilities, and ground capabilities, and China and Russia are helping them. You know who supplies America with weapons? America. You know who supplies America with troops? America. Europe isn't even willing to commit in the Ukraine. Not that they should commit to Iran, but my point is, Europe isn't in a position to even unite its resources to stop Russia's aggression. So, if America gets itself involved in Iran against a power that is actually capable of standing on its own 2 feet, we're not in a good place. Secondly, the U.S. Gerald Ford is currently suffering catastrophic failures. Catastrophic failures. It's going to be docked. It's going to be, because of the sanitation problems. Wars have been lost for significantly less, I can assure you. So, although 1/3 of the Navy is stationed in the Persian Gulf, if half of that third is the U.S. Gerald Ford, well, now we only have 1/6 of the Navy. And that is a significant loss of resources. So, there is not a situation in which war with Iran results in anything other than a major embarrassment for the United States of America, given that Trump is petty and narcissistic and egotistical and extremely fragile at that. A loss here, militarily, might cause him to do something unspeakable. Chemical, biological, or atomic. Well, nuclear. And honestly, at that point, I truly hope that the Joint Chiefs finally find their fucking spines and disobey orders, because war with Iran could not be the most clear example of an unlawful order and an unlawful attack. One, all attacks are unlawful, but, you know, let's not mince words, right? So, let us continue.
Turning now to the
Oh,
situation.
look, I'm not the only one saying it.
with Iran. Huge leaks coming out of the Pentagon yesterday. This time, if you want to believe this, the Pentagon is leaking about how desperately they don't want to go to war with Iran. That is how bad the current situation is. But Donald Trump is trying to head off all of these leaks. Let's go and put this up here on the screen. Here is Trump's truth yesterday. Numerous stories from the fake news media have been circulating that General Daniel Cain, sometimes referred to as Raising Cain, is against us going to war with Iran. The story does not attribute his vast wealth of knowledge to anyone and is 100% incorrect. General Cain, like all of us, would like not to see war. But if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it is his opinion that everything will be easily won. Bookmark that for history. He knows Iran well in that he was in charge of Midnight Hammer, the attacks on Iranian nuclear development. It is a development no longer, but rather was blown to smithereens by our great B-2 bombers. So if that's the case, then why do we even have to go to war? All right, this is why everybody should actually read these things carefully. Raising Cain is a great fighter. He represents the most powerful military in the world. He's not spoken to of not doing Iran or even the fake limited strikes that I have been reading about. He only knows one thing, how to win, and if he is told to do so, he will be leading the pack. Quote, I would rather have a deal than not, but if we don't make a deal, it is a very bad day for that country and very sadly its people, because they are great and wonderful and something like this should never have happened to them. So this followed an extraordinary amount of leaks that came out of the Pentagon. Let's go and put these up here on the screen.
See, I haven't seen any of those leaks on my feed. Not a single fucking one of them, which is really weird. You would think that would be taking precedence on, you know, Facebook, Twitter, any of it, right? So tomorrow, I think we should have at least 1 or 2 videos to cover the leaks, if you would please.
I want to kind of Washington explain. You hear one story, that's one thing. When you have Axios, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal all write this headline, Trump's top general warns of Iran strike. Trump's top general foresees acute risk in an attack on Iran. Pentagon flags risk of a major operation against Iran. Here is what is happening. These are authorized leaks from the very, very top of the Pentagon. What they want is to get on the record as close as they can without going outside the chain of command to say, this is a really, really bad idea. And if you actually read all of their warnings, if you've been watching this show or if you've been paying attention to the news, none of this will be a shocker to you. They say, we have a limited amount of air interceptors. We used 25% in the 12-day war. The Houthis were...
So that's what I wanted to talk about, right? How we have diminished capabilities. I didn't realize it was specifically in the 12-day war. I thought it was actually the Gaza, genocide. But we used 25% of our interceptors in 12 fucking days? Do you not even understand? Like, 25% of all missile interceptors were used in 12 days. And we want to talk about winning a war? Are you fucking kidding me? Also, for tomorrow, please have at least 1 or 2 videos covering the general's warnings. Although I guess we are covering it now, but still, maybe something that's specific to that.
Huge problem. Because of our 4-year support now of Israel and of Ukraine, we are dramatically low on munitions. They point to a CSIS war game from 2023, which said that the United States would last 1 week in terms of munitions if we were ever to get into a war with China against Taiwan. You think I'm joking? This is 2023. The situation's gotten worse. We've actually given more to Israel and Ukraine since that time period, and the amount of spin up in our defense industrial base has actually gone down. So you can see that for them, they know, look, we can kidnap Maduro all day long. We can Midnight Hammer 6 B-2s with a place with no real aerial defense or any of that, whatever. But a real war, like ballistic missiles flying around, which we saw in the 12-day war, that alone drained 25% of our THAAD interceptors. The Pentagon is doing everything they can to try and have their Eric Shinseki moment. And look, bear with me. It's a little bit of a trip down memory lane. But back in 2003, February 2003, the Army Chief of Staff, Eric Shinseki, was forced to testify before Congress before the invasion of Iraq. And the Army Chief of Staff stunned America and the world when he said it would take several 100,000 troops to invade Iraq successfully. The neocons like Mark Levin and, Bill Kristol And the Bush administration said he's a raving lunatic. It's an absolute lie. And they fired him. They forced him out of office. He was the Army Chief of Staff, but he was trying to warn all of us. And there were multiple other top generals internally, some who resigned, people who told the president to his face, this is a bad idea. They leaked as much as they could, but our media was very propagandistic, just as it is right now. They were trying their best to do something like this. The professionals, and remember, these are not bleeding heart liberals. They're not anti-war like me. Dan Kane was one of the foremost proponents of the Maduro raid. He knows the capabilities of the U.S. military. When you have these guys going like, please get us off, like, do not make us do this, it is a blaring, like a flashing red light for the whole, because nobody knows our capabilities more than them. So when they're warning like this, they're doing their best. First of all, they want to survive. They want to be able to have the headline there in the future so that when a Democrat comes into the power, they're like, listen, man, we tried to tell him, he ordered us to do it. But more importantly, they're trying to
It is funny, though, that it always comes down to the Nuremberg defense. Hey, I tried letting you know we shouldn't have done this. I did it anyway because I was ordered to, so don't hold it against me. Like, come on! We need leadership. Leadership. Tell the president to go fuck himself, and then tell Congress to impeach his fucking ass. Yes, as a general, go to Congress and be like, I will testify that he is issuing unlawful orders, is unfit to lead, unfit to be president, and that he should be impeached. And you motherfuckers should get off your fucking asses and impeach the motherfucker before we end up in World War III. Christ. These Nazis walk amongst us. They sure fucking do. One asked me if I believe Israeli is an apartheid state due to my shirt saying, and Israel apartheid state. He said he was there for a year and it's more nuanced than that. I share the gym with a Nazi. Well, so this is what you do. You go to that gym, you talk to that person, and you wait until they're doing chest day on the bench. And you're like, come on, let's do a PR day. Let's do a PR day. Whatever they're doing, right? If they're repping 145, right? Maybe they're repping 225. Maybe they're just animals, right? They're repping 225. Hey, dude, let's do a PR day. You throw 2 plates on that shit. And then when they're be like, oh, sorry, I can't hear you. I'm sorry. I don't believe in apartheid or Nazis. So somebody who's a Nazi sympathizer that wants to help the Nazi. The Nazi needs a spot. Just my suggestion.
Signal for those of you who are close watchers and observers to say this is not going to go like the propaganda is. And it's already happening. Mark Levin, it's been 20-something years. He's doing the same thing. These are Democrat, deep state, isolationists trying to destroy. You have Trump now trying to box the general in. He's going to try and force him to go on the podium and say, actually, it's going to be a cakewalk. I hope he says the word cakewalk. I really do, just so we can have all the Iraq stuff happen again. I'm not claiming it's going to be the same as Iraq, but it's the same type of playbook. These are very sophisticated.
No, it's not going to be like Iraq because we actually were there for 20 years and we didn't get massacred. No, we just murdered 1 million Iraqi civilians. But as far as our own troop losses, I think it was only over the course of 20 years, 70,000 or something like that. If we go to war with Iran and actually try a full-scale invasion, again, without the authorization of Congress, I might add, if our vessels survive the counterattack, okay, so here's the worst. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Guns. Right? What do? They pew-pew, right? America is really happy about using its guns, right? We don't get very antsy if we lose a couple guns. You know when America gets antsy is when you touch our fucking boats. When America's boats get touched, bad shit happens. Last time our boats got touched, 2 nuclear weapons were dropped. Okay? This invasion in Iran has so much potential for disaster that we might lose an aircraft carrier. Something that has never happened in U.S. history. although I would even go so far as to say world history. You don't have to quote me on that. You can fact check me. I don't feel like looking it up right now. If our initial strikes on Iran do not result in immediate infrastructure destruction and crippling of their military capabilities, and Iran retaliates and manages to sink one of our carriers, Trump won't have the choice America won't have a choice but to do a full-scale invasion. And at that point, we have already lost. Because the manpower that we would need to commit to that would be immense, and it would draw the entire region into the conflict. The fact that we're pushing so hard for war on behalf of Israel is going to dangerously impact world history. Not just the Middle East, world history. Because you can believe that America, Trump, will try and drag NATO and the United Nations or whatever else into it, even though they have spent the past year disparaging both institutions. And like he said earlier, Sager, Trump has never had to weather military casualties or losses. And he can't even handle being scrutinized by reporters. It is going to be very, like this right here. Invading Venezuela didn't instigate World War III, thank God, but it could have. That was very capable, very plausible. Destroying Cuba seems to be also not a likely World War III event. Ukraine is clearly not a World War III event. Iran, very, I would say 75% chance of inflaming World War III. Because if Iran isn't, because it is a major country and a major power in the region with influence, with actual gravitas. And I'm not saying that Cuba and Venezuela are relevant countries in South America. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that they are already compromised in the sense. It's already tolerated across the globe that Cuba has been blockaded and Venezuela has been invaded and occupied. That being said, Iran is a completely different animal. Completely different animal. And if we attack it and it blows up in our face, which it fucking will, this administration does not have the maturity or the sense to pull out. They will drag us into this war. And then I will enter into this Congress in 2027 dealing with war that my predecessor congressman didn't even authorize. So, we did kill 1 million Iraqis and displaced hundreds of thousands. Then Europe complains about Muslim immigrants in Europe. Exactly. So, all sorts of fun and games. Yeah.
Sophisticated actors, this is the biggest warning. And when the professional warriors tell you this is a big problem, you should listen, because what they're talking about, this isn't ideology. This is about logistics. This is about munitions. This is about defense industrial base. Nobody knows this better than them. This is the most worrying thing that I've seen yet.
Yeah.
Because this means it's happening, in my opinion.
Yeah, this is like a desperate cry for help, a last-ditch Hail Mary pass to try to, persuade Trump and whoever that this is going to be a terrible idea. This is a warning to the American public. It's all of those things. And, I think why the neocons are pushing so hard right now is a few reasons. I mean, the Iranian government is genuinely weakened at this point from the 12-day war, also from the protests and the opposition movement, from the economic warfare that we've waged against them has been quite successful. So they are weakened in this moment. But are they weak enough where, an airstrike will take down the government? Because that's their fantasy is, let's put aside, nuclear, ballistic, blah, blah, blah. What they really are after is regime change. And at the same time, the Israelis, who are obviously, constantly pushing for war with Iran, and Netanyahu's been pushing for war with Iran like before you were literally born.
Yeah, no,
literally, you can go back and watch the clips from the 80s and whatever. Anyway, they have their own sort of looming crises internally. even though there was a lot of unity around the Gaza genocide, the reality is they have major demographic and major economic issues. And they've had a lot of brain drain from their country. The fastest growing part of the Jewish population in Israel are, the type that don't want to serve in the military and don't want to work and just want to rely on the social safety net. So they have their own timeline here of like, we've got to act now or else we're not going to be able to cement our, grander ambitions of the Greater Israel Project and having total regional hegemony.
And isn't that the most fucking damning thing? Everybody in charge right now wants to have a military violent legacy. Where's the legacy of peace? I'm the president who brokered trade prosperity across the globe. International trade prosperity for everybody. I was the president that brokered a international R&D campaign for the next generation of technology and energy. My legacy is I invested in NASA to such a degree that we literally did put somebody on Mars. Right? Why is the legacy I have to slaughter the enemy? I have to raise hell. I have to rain bombs and terror and flames upon my enemies of my father and his father and the father before him. Why is it always that the legacy that is sought is depravity, destruction, slaughter, death, massacre, oppression, subjugation? Why is it never peace? Why is it never diplomacy? Why is it never trade? Why is it never research and development? Why is it never social growth or expansion? It's always, always, always destruction and war. And it's getting worse by the day. Okay, so that must have been one of the top general videos. So we'll do the other one tomorrow. Ukraine.
Well, it's hard to believe, but today marks 4 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. During his morning address today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Vladimir Putin has failed to achieve his objectives. Zelensky also invited U.S. President Donald Trump to visit Kyiv. According to the UN, more than 15,000 civilians have been killed in the conflict. And it's estimated the number of soldiers killed, injured, or missing on both sides could reach 2 million by this spring, according to a report published last month by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Talks to end the war in Ukraine are ongoing. U.S.-led discussions between itself, Russia, and Ukraine were held in Geneva last week, but there has not been a breakthrough so far. Now, we wanted to take a look back at some of the major events from the war to bring you up to speed. The Russian invasion began on February 24th, 2022. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the start of what he called a, quote, special military operation in Ukraine. Russian forces attempted to capture the capital, Kyiv, and other major cities quickly, but met with fierce Ukrainian resistance.
Just to put that into perspective, Russia, like America, thought that their military excursion was going to go off without a hitch. This was going to be easy squeezy lemon peasy because what the fuck is Ukraine, right? It's a big country with a whole lot of nothing to go show for it, right? They don't have a strong military, right? I mean, what was the Ukrainian military prior to, the fuck? Bro, what is going on with the internet right now? Go away. Go to Google, you dumb piece of shit. Thank you. So... Are we going to actually have numbers? Because that's what I was looking for, was numbers. So there was 46,000 personnel. 6,000 out of the 41,000 in Ukraine. 41,000 is not a very large number of soldiers for any country, let alone Ukraine facing Ruskovia, right? So Russia was like, our intel says the Ukrainians have fuck all in terms of readiness and probably no defense systems in place. Let's get this shit done and over with, and we'll be back to drinking vodka and smoking cigarettes by tea time, right? Or by vodka and cigarettes time. And 4 years later, they're still at it with 2 million total casualties on both sides. What Russia thought was going to happen in Ukraine is what America thinks is going to happen in Iran. And the result is probably going to be infinitely worse because Russia is not actually trying to destroy Ukraine, they're trying to conquer Ukraine. Whereas America is actively trying to destroy Iran. And with that level of desperation, Iran will fight back that much harder. So we can actually look as an example as to what will happen with America and Iran to what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Like, what is happening here is literally the prelude to what is going to happen in Iran if or when we attack. And the fact that nobody seems to want to be making those connections is also pretty distressing.
First Ukrainian city to fall was Kherson on March 2nd. That was followed by the port city of Mariupol after a siege described by the International Committee of the Red Cross as, quote, hell. But Russian control of Kherson didn't last long. Ukrainian forces took the city and surrounding areas back, along with parts of Mykolaiv in the south and Kharkiv in the east by November 2022. Since then, fighting has largely been confined to the east and south, with only incremental changes along the front line. Russia announced it had annexed the 4 territories of the Donbas region in September of 2022, despite not fully controlling them. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams is live in Rivne, Ukraine for us this morning. Holly, you have been covering this conflict for 4 years now. What changes have you seen on the ground over that time?
Good morning, Michael. You know, in the opening months of the war, the mood here was really one of defiance and at times even triumph, especially when Ukrainian forces, who were vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the Russians, managed to push the Russian military back from around Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, and then launch an extremely successful counteroffensive in the east. Then last year, after Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had that contentious meeting with President Trump at the White House, the mood really shifted here, almost to despair and fear. Many Ukrainians told us they were worried that President Trump was going to force Ukraine into a ceasefire deal that compelled them to hand over land to Russia and didn't give them any security guarantees or enough security guarantees to prevent Russia from invading again in the future. Now, though, Michael, I think...
So imagine that. Ukrainians had extremely high morale because they pushed back Russia, or at least didn't get immediately slaughtered by Russia. And then Trump opens his bigoted fucking mouth. Well, I'm sorry, J.D. Vance opens his bigoted fucking mouth. And now the Ukrainians are dropping morale by the day because they are not certain if they will get a peace deal that'll actually result in peace and not occupation. Again, the legacy of this president, of this administration, is one of destruction and despair, of failure, abject and total failure. So, I don't want to listen to more depressing stuff. I mean, we spent a lot of time on Iran today, but I guess since it's about to be World War III, we kind of do. You heard it here first. We do not support the war in Iran, and it is a very bad idea. Samuel Ronan, Congress candidate, Republican primary, May 5th. Be there. Right? Like, this is... Oh, ay Dios mío, as the kids say, right?
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We end today's show with a longtime war crimes prosecutor, Reed Brody. He's been closely following a number of stories that revolve around law and accountability. From the international fallout over the Epstein files to this week's hearing in The Hague on whether former Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte should stand trial before the International Criminal Court. to today, this fourth anniversary of Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Reed Brody is a member of the International Commission of Jurists and author of To Catch a Dictator, The Pursuit and Trial of Hissène Habré. Reed, let's begin with the arrest of Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador to the United States, accused of passing confidential government information to Jeffrey Epstein while he was serving as Britain's trade secretary. His arrest comes days after the also arrest of the former Prince Andrew. Neither of them are being charged for abuse of minors or girls. And
Imagine that. Amy Goodman is bringing up the very same point I did earlier today.
Women, though the emails are, to say the least, stunning and horrifying between them and Jeffrey Epstein after he was known to abuse children. But talk about what is happening abroad and what is happening here at home as a result of the fallout from the Epstein files.
Well, it's really crazy how you have, throughout Europe, all of these heads rolling and all of these arrests, and relatively little accountability in the United States. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing, all these Epstein-related arrests across Europe is that prosecutors and police are generally independent of political power. I mean, the Metropolitan Police did not have to ask anybody to go and arrest Peter Mandelson or or the former Prince Andrew. In the United States, the federal prosecutors and the FBI are only going to investigate those people who Donald Trump wants investigated. And so there is no prosecutorial independence in the United States. There have been calls, and I think, for a special counsel to investigate the Epstein affair.
Here.
That would be what would normally happen if there's a conflict of interest. But of course, we know that in Trump's first term, when Jeff Sessions appointed Robert Mueller as special counsel, he was fired. So there's not going to be a special counsel. There's not going to be, investigations of political figures here, because the Justice Department in the United States has been acting like Donald Trump's private law firm. And so, I think there are a number of other, I get asked all the time in Europe, why isn't there more accountability here in the United States? And I think that's one big reason. I also think, the class issue that Ro Khanna is always talking about, how these are billionaires, who abuse working class women. I think that's resonates more in European societies somewhat than in American societies. But I think, this cannot be the end of the affair, so to speak, for the Epstein file. We're going to see this continue.
Which kind of brings up a very important point. So another buddy of Trump's, Duterte, the butcher from Manila. Yeah. What's up, Razor? I don't want to be rude, but did you watch Trump's speech in his latest meeting? No. He focused on his supporters. This makes me laugh because they don't believe what he says, but they want to hear those words to convince people. Yeah. No, I didn't. We did not watch the State of the Union. That doesn't make us very good Republicans, I guess. But if I wanted to listen to lies and deceit, I would listen to it, but I don't. But something that he brought up, Reed Brody, as he's staring into our souls, is prosecution and police are separated from politics. And my current policy provision on my website right now is the federalization of law enforcement. And the idea would be that they're all held to a same standard. Like, all law enforcement is held to the same standard, and that they have a very specific set of jurisdiction and guidelines in which they can engage. But perhaps there needs to be a way to separate them from government altogether. But I can't wrap my head around that, because wouldn't law enforcement, policing institutions as a whole fundamentally be a political entity? So, like, it's not like it maybe I'm too American. So I'm trying to flesh this one out. I'm literally trying to think about this. You have a chief of police who is appointed by the mayor in the United States, right? But you also have a sheriff that is elected at the county level. So that would intrinsically be political. The sheriff would have intrinsically be political. But so would the chief of police if they're appointed by the mayor. So if that's not, honestly, I feel like I would have to, how do British police operate without being political? I don't know that that's the right question. All right, according to Wikipedia, law enforcement is organized separately in each of the legal systems of the UK. Most law enforcement duties are carried out by police, constables, or territorial police. There are 48 forces, 39, The British model of policing is based on 3 interrelated concepts: the office of constable, independence, and policing by consent. Okay, so there is a separation of powers. Independently of government with the implicit consent of the public. Policing by consent is the phrase used to describe this. But how? How are they doing this independent of the government? That's what I'm not understanding. Like, are they not being paid through tax dollars? I'm really not understanding this. So the powers. Powers to investigate, prevent, and dispose of criminal cases. So there's also acts where companies or councils can employ constables. That doesn't seem like that's any smarter or safer. I guess we would have to get into a significantly deeper dive of this than I care to be honest. Oh, that's right, Jesse Jackson. Yeah, but we have a few too many tabs in here. Shirley Chisholm. Oh. All of our coal. Yep, that's kind of important, but that should be more of a stream links than a Wikipedia. Soviet Union timeline. Havana syndrome, asteroid mining. That might be useful in the future. That's not that useful. That might be useful. That won't be useful. Navy. Yeah, the Navy's about to learn something. Dictatorship, yes. Corporatocracy. Oligopoly. Freedom Index. Ooh. Nicolas Maduro. Oh, here we go. This guy. Are they bringing up that shit has been in some severe straits? Also, the USS Gerald R. Ford has its own Wikipedia page at a time when we are about to engage in war with Iran, and it's talking about all of its design features, the development, its systems, the type of reactor it has, its flight deck, power generation, launch systems, like... Hey, enemy, just in case you were wondering, we have better weapons than you. Does it mention the sanitation system? Because it is clearly not doing so. Oh, the crew accommodations. So it actually has less sailors on it than others. Interesting. Oh, it is bringing up the... Since deployment, the first 2 carriers of the class have run into problems with the plumbing of the waste system. Let's go, Wikipedia nerds! The pipes were too narrow to handle the load of users, resulting in the vacuum failing and repeatedly clogging toilets. To alleviate the problem, specialized acidic cleaning solutions have been used to flush out the sewage system. Let's go! So if Iran wants to win the war, all they have to do is stop the cleaning systems from being supplied. Talk about a shitty situation. And listen, I'm not disparaging our armed forces. I'm not. I'm really not. This is just extremely indicative of how fucked up of an idea it is to go invade another country that is going to have the ability to push back against us when we don't even have fully functioning weapon systems and weapons capabilities, right? Because let's be very clear, we might have the best bombs and tactical weapon systems on planet Earth, but if we cannot stay in theater without giving ourselves cholera and other diseases that have killed sailors for millennia, it's not going to do us much good. Tucker and Carlson about Iran and Israel. He destroyed the other guy who's extremely supporting. Yeah, no, that's because Huckabee is a Zionist piece of garbage. That's why he got destroyed. Anywho.
Well, Reed, there was a panel of independent experts appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council has actually called for an independent and impartial investigation of the alleged sex crimes contained in the Epstein files. And the panel said, quote, "So grave is the scale, nature, systematic character, and transnational reach of these atrocities against women and girls that a number of them may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity." The importance of this effort, and do you think it has any prospects?
Well, I think, there can be international investigations. The problem is that the actual files, the actual power to call witnesses and to get to the bottom of this is here in the United States, is with federal authorities. And of course, some states now can take up the slack. I mean, in New York State, there is no statute of limitations for the worst sex crimes. So you could see state prosecutors taking this up.
I want to turn for...
Yeah, but state prosecutors could only take it up if those alleged crimes occurred in New York State. Now, yes, plenty of them did. The Trump Tower, the Manhattan apartment, but there's also the Zorro Ranch, which is in Arizona, and there's also Mar-a-Lago, which is in Florida, right? And God knows, these things probably happened in all 50 states. It probably happened all over the damn world, to be honest. So if it's up to the states to do it, then sure, but that still doesn't mean you're going to get a broad sweep, which is why the federal government needs to act, but it won't because it's complicit. I bet these people don't see it as a crime. They describe the Palestinians as animals and evil because they defend their land with stones. What a mockery. They have the strongest weapons but are afraid of stones and holes. Well, no, that's exactly the point, right? Israel, the Zionist entity, are modern-day Nazis, and they have dehumanized the Palestinians to such a degree that they do not care that they are slaughtering men, women, children, and infants. And these billionaires in the Epstein files, the Epstein class, the Epstein, what did we call it, regime, are also equally depraved. They do not view anyone other than themselves as worthy of living on planet Earth. So, I mean, it is what it is as far as that goes.
For a moment, we're trying to get to a lot of issues in these few minutes. To the ICC, the hearing ICC at The Hague around the Filipino president Duterte, who was arrested and being held there.
Well, I mean, this is a monumental event for the Philippines. I mean, the former head of state, the former president, these are confirmation of charges hearings to determine whether he should stand trial for having allegedly ordered and instigated the killing, the extrajudicial killing of alleged drug dealers. I mean, thousands, potentially tens of thousands of Filipinos have been killed. Ironically, speaking of double standards, these are the same crimes which Donald Trump has presumptively committed by the strikes that you reported earlier in the.
Hello? Hello, somebody. Isn't that Nina Turner's call to action? Hello, somebody. Reed Brody, folks, saying what we've all been saying for months. Like, if this is a crime, then so is what Trump is doing. If that is a crime, then so is what Trump is doing. Like, Trump is committing all of the crimes. All of them. No accountability from anyone, anywhere. It's fucking ridiculous.
The Caribbean, the extrajudicial execution without due process of alleged drug dealers.
Wait, is that why Trump is doing it? Because Duterte did it first and he was like, hey, shit, he got away with it. I am too. Like, do they seriously just jerk each other off in a circle? It's like, what kind of crimes can we commit first? Yes. Oh, yeah. Killing them and calling them drug dealers. Yes, let's do it. Oh, shit, he's in prison. Well, we're America. We're untouchable, so let's do it next. And then it's like, what about that dictator? He did something. We should follow suit. Oh, what about that dictator and that authoritarian? It's extremely, extremely fucking frustrating.
But Rodrigo Duterte is in The Hague and Donald Trump is in the White House. I think, this is also a watershed moment for the International Criminal Court to have a former head of state in the dock.
Exactly. Maybe we can set a fucking precedent and maybe get Netanyahu's ass in front of them. And then Trump. Like, yes, let's fucking go. Let's get all of these fuckers.
In 24 years and at a cost of probably $3 billion, the International Criminal Court has never successfully captured and prosecuted and convicted any state official anywhere, much less a former head of state.
Which doesn't that defeat the entire fucking purpose of the United Nations? If the United Nations can't hold state actors or former heads of state accountable, then why the fuck does it exist?
And so, Rodrigo Duterte probably thought he was home free. But, you also have a number of other people who've been indicted by the ICC. Vladimir Putin, Benjamin Netanyahu, Min Aung Hlaing of Myanmar. So a bunch of former heads of state out there, but they haven't been brought in. The International Criminal Court does not have a police force. So this is a major moment for international justice and for the ICC.
And Reed, we only have about a minute left, but I'm wondering, the world is marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There are no signs of it stopping soon. President Trump promised on day one he'd end the war. Here, a year later, it's still not ended. Why does peace seem so out of reach?
Well, I think, this is a policy on both sides of endless war. Talking about, accountability, the Russian invasion and Russian crimes in Ukraine have led to probably the most coordinated international justice response in history. I mean, the International Criminal Court has indicted Vladimir Putin and his Minister for Child Affairs for thousands of Ukrainian children who were kidnapped. You have 4 other, the former chiefs of staff and defense minister and 2 generals who have been indicted for attacking Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. You have tens of thousands of cases, war crimes cases going through the Ukrainian courts. And you have the recently created special tribunal on aggression against Ukraine that may prosecute Russian leaders for the worst crime that was committed, which was the invasion of Ukraine. All these accountability things are moving forward, but peace doesn't seem anywhere closer than it did 4 years ago.
Well, and he said it himself. There's no police forcing to enforce it, right? The ICC does not have a police force to go and arrest people, which actually begs the question. If leaders ignore the Supreme Court, what remedies does the Supreme Court have to arrest? The court's primary legal remedy is holding individuals in civil or criminal contempt, which is fines or imprisonment of officials to coerce compliance. While rare, the court can theoretically use marshals to enforce orders, though practical enforcement relies on the executive branch obeying the rule of law. That's fucking fantastic. Fan-fucking-tastic. Shut the fuck up, you goddamn paywall fuckers. To be sure, a court that appointed someone other than the marshals to enforce a civil contempt order would be breaking new ground. Because of the marshals' long and honorable history of respecting their legal obligation to enforce federal court orders, the courts have rarely, if ever, had to turn to other parties to have their orders enforced. If forced to do so, however, individuals from court security officers and probation officers to local police and sheriffs have the training and experience to bring contemners into court. And unlike the marshals, these individuals would be responsible to the court alone. Even a rogue marshal service, in other words, is not an insurmountable obstacle to courts enforcing the rule of law. If courts have the courage, the legal tools are there. So, that right there states unequivocally that the U.S. Marshals are not arresting Trump or anyone in the administration because they don't have, they're either compromised or something else. And the courts aren't pushing the issue because they don't want to, which is still a de facto capitulation to the executive from the judicial. Meaning, we have a de facto dictatorship because the judicial branch is not enforcing its authority, and neither is Congress, which is why we need people to run for office who will exercise their rights of checks and balance on the executive. Like this. Or if we want dictators, if we really just want to go full authoritarian, okay, fine. Then can we at least do better? Like, that's the question, right? If we're heading towards a dictatorship, why are we allowing it to be the most idiotic, dementia-ridden, racist pedophile in human history? And that's the question, right? Like, obviously we shouldn't want dictators. We shouldn't want fascists in power. So why are we allowing one with the worst possible track record of morals and intelligence and leadership capabilities? And what's worse is the Supreme Court is apparently aiding and abetting by not following through even on its unanimous decisions to stop this administration. That's honestly really fucking depressing. If we're being honest, that is really, really fucking depressing. Which is why we need to clean house, top to bottom. SCOTUS needs to go. Most of Congress, you know what? Fuck it. All of Congress needs to go. And then this entire administration needs to go. And we just need to hold snap elections. And none of those fuckers are eligible for re-election or reappointment. Oh, here we go. Mexico.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We turn now to Mexico, still reeling from a wave of violence following a U.S. intelligence-aided raid killing the powerful drug lord commonly known as El Mencho Sunday morning. At least 70 people were killed in the raid targeting Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and an ensuing violence as armed groups retaliated in more than a dozen Mexican states. Suspected gang members blocked highways and set cars on fire, buses and businesses, while clashing with security forces. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said the situation is normalizing, and the U.S. State Department continues to urge American citizens in Mexico to shelter in place amidst ongoing security operations and criminal activity. Reuters and the New York Times report that the Mexican raid targeted Oseguera, who headed Mexico's largest cartel, was aided by intelligence from the CIA.
You know, I got to admit, this guy looks like a guy. This does not look like the head of a cartel. He doesn't have any scars. I don't know about, maybe he does have a shit ton of tattoos and scars. I don't know. But from this picture alone, he looks like somebody's dad, somebody's uncle. And that's the head of one of the most brutal cartels in the world. It was.
And a new U.S. military-led task force. Speaking at a news conference on Monday, President Sheinbaum said the United States only played an information-sharing role in the Mexican military attack.
All operations are carried out by federal forces. There is no U.S. participation in the operation. What there is, as we have said here several times, is a great deal of information sharing. The understanding with the United States is based primarily on the exchange of intelligence information. In this case, the U.S. government provided information and even issued an intelligence statement. But the entire operation, from planning onwards, is the responsibility of federal forces, in this case, the Ministry of National Defense.
The surprise raid killing the cartel leader Oseguera, El Mencho, was the biggest Mexican security operation in over a decade and comes amidst rising pressure on Mexico from President Trump to crack down on drug cartels and organized crime in Mexico. For more, we're joined by Reuters reporter Laura Gottesdiener in Monterrey, Mexico, part of the Reuters team that won.
You know, I don't get... How is taking on the cartel an issue for America in the first place? Secondly, why would American presidents be the one pressuring this issue? Why are you reporting it from that angle? Is it that hard to believe that Claudia was working on this raid since she got elected, and then was like, you know what, now's the time to pull the trigger, and then did? Like, why is it so hard to believe that a female president is capable of initiating a military type operation? I don't understand that.
Won the 2025 Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting for their expose on lax regulation in the U.S. and abroad that makes fentanyl, one of the world's deadliest drugs, inexpensive and widely available to users in the United States. Laura Gottesdiener is also a former producer at Democracy Now! Laura, congratulations on the Pulitzer. We haven't gotten a chance to congratulate you on the air, but most importantly right now.
So wait, she used to work for Democracy Now!, left, got the Pulitzer, and is now coming back to be interviewed? I mean, isn't that like quitting your job and coming back like for an interview after you got a promotion above your previous, like that? I don't know. That seems pretty whatever it is, it's giving energy, positive energy.
Your piece is so important. You've written several in the last few days as you give background on what has taken place on Sunday morning. Can you explain the president, Claudia Sheinbaum's predecessor from the Morena party, AMLO, came to power in part because of the public's frustration with the militarized war on drugs. Can you talk about the significance now of President Sheinbaum's action?
Thank you so much for having me, and hello to the whole control room and Democracy Now! Team. Thank you. Yes, so this is a very critical moment here in Mexico. The raid was really considered a shock here in Mexico, at least according to the sources that I've spoken to. El Mencho, unlike some of the leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, for example, he was a very shadowy figure. He didn't call a lot of attention to himself, and he's been sought by 3 Mexican administrations, multiple U.S. administrations.
Okay, so I'm not the only one. Like, this dude was just some guy, but he was in charge of like the cartel. And he was just probably walking around having cervezas and tacos, just no big deal. And then he got.
So this is somebody who was wanted for a very long time. Obviously, the timing of the raid as well, in advance, of the World Cup. There are going to be games scheduled to play in Guadalajara. That all makes for a particularly dramatic situation. Obviously, the violence as well across parts of Mexico, all on the day on Sunday. was very dramatic. But, as the president emphasized in our morning news conference yesterday, across most of the country, the situation was calm. The retaliatory wave of violence really was something that showed the breadth of the territorial reach of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which El Mencho was the leader of. But the real question remains to be seen whether this kicks off what often happens, which is a fracturing and infighting in a large criminal organization that then creates a sustained wave of violence that targets, of course, security forces, but also civilians all across sectors of society. So that's really the concern, whether this is going to create a wave of violence or whether this is something that the Mexican government, they've sent some 2,000 troops to Jalisco, the stronghold of the cartel, or if this is something that the Mexican government will be able to control. It's also unclear, based on the structure of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, what exactly the succession plans could be, but also what exactly a fracturing might look like, unlike with the Sinaloa cartel, which fractured and has created sort of spectacular and terrible violence in Sinaloa due to the fracturing in 2024, which resulted because of which was kicked off because of the capture of El Mayo in the United States. The Jalisco cartel is a much more sort of decentralized franchise-based operation. So it is not clear sort of whether there are strong entrenched rivalries that will result in this sort of unfortunate and terrible ongoing violence that we're seeing in Sinaloa.
All right, I'm sorry. So there are cartels that are like corporations that once the CEO goes away, it fragments for the power vacuum. There are cartels, well, I guess we shouldn't compare them to corporations, even though they are probably the same ruthless, soul-sucking pieces of garbage as CEOs are. But more structure that once you lose the head, there's a power vacuum. And then you have the Uber of cartels, like the McDonald's of cartels, where each if a McDonald's shuts down in Columbus, Ohio, it's not going to impact the rest of McDonald's anywhere else. And if the McDonald's CEO is fired, killed, or whatever else, it's not going to stop McDonald's from running. It's so big and it's so integrated that who cares, right? Who's in charge? That's kind of crazy. And again, I have to make a capitalist comparison, but nuts. Sorry, Razor. I definitely have not been paying attention. Oh. All the wars in our current era are caused by foolish things due to the decisions of some crazy people. Yeah. And as it turns out, many of those wars may be able to be directly attributed to the Epstein regime. We will repeat what Trump said in his election campaign. I will stop the war. Guess what? We will start a war with Iran. Right. So, again, the anti-war candidate turns out to be one of the biggest hawks ever.
And Laura, I wanted to ask you, the Sheinbaum's predecessor, AMLO, really sought to tamp down this heavy-handed approach to the cartels in Mexico. Could you talk about the difference since Sheinbaum has come in as president in her approach to combating drug trafficking, and to what degree U.S. pressure has forced her hand in this?
I swear to God. All right.
That's absolutely excellent question, Juan. Thank you so much. As you know better than almost anyone, this long-running U.S.-backed drug war is a combination of pressure from the United States as well as efforts by governments, whether Colombia or Mexico. Felipe Calderon obviously declared the war on drugs in Mexico in 2006. And yes, in 2018, López Obrador was elected in a landslide victory for various reasons. Also, widespread frustration about inequality and injustice in Mexico, but also in large part because of frustration over this drug war and the U.S.-backed drug war. Frustration both in terms of U.S. pressure and frustration in terms of, the Mexican role leading this drug war. Unfortunately, there was a real mixed results from López Obrador's efforts to use social programs to combat the insecurity in the country. His social programs, which are, which Sheinbaum has continued and which are widely popular, historically reduced poverty. And that was a huge success for the government. And that is something that the Morena Party is continuing to prioritize, not only because it's popular, but because it is reducing poverty across the country. Yet at the same time, we saw López Obrador's administration, the homicide rates ticked down, but many security experts say that the cartels also became more entrenched, expanded to new illicit industries, were able to sort of further control territories. So it was complicated. And when Sheinbaum came in, which of course comes in the context of, U.S. President Donald Trump's election and then taking office, immediately the Sheinbaum administration stepped up the war against the cartels, deployed.
Thank you. Strong, independent woman who don't need no fucking tyrant with orange makeup shitting his pants on national television telling her what to do. Claudia stepped it up on her own. Thank you for saying so, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Laura Gottesdiener. Because that is a very German name.
Forces to Sinaloa, which at the time was both locked in a bloody battle that continues, but also was the absolute #1 priority for the U.S. government, because the U.S. government blames the Sinaloa cartel, principally the Los Chapitos faction, for the fentanyl crisis. So that was seen as both, important in terms of Mexican security, but principally under a lot of U.S. pressure and a huge priority for the U.S. government. Since Trump came into office, all of the pressure continues, and I think we have to understand the El Mencho raid in the context of the January 3rd military attack in Caracas, in Venezuela, by the U.S. Special Forces. That sent shockwaves all across the region. And there's a real sense in Mexico and beyond that governments need to show the U.S. that they are willing and able to take military action on their own, lest Washington send special forces into the country.
That is a very polite way of saying that countries are needing to bolster their own military activities lest they get invaded by the United States Armed Forces. Regime change. Overtly. Not the CIA, but the actual military and special forces coming in, swooping in, taking your elected official, and then charging them with bullshit.
In general, this raid is being considered, is being seen as a signal that President Sheinbaum is sending to Washington. We not only can, but will take these types of, unprecedented military operations, but do not send special forces into the country. This is a red line in Mexico.
Laura, can you talk about the new U.S. Joint Interagency Task Force counter cartel that you report played a key role in the Mexican military raid on Sunday?
Yeah, my colleague Phil Stewart in Washington interviewed the head of the Joint Interagency Task Force counter cartel ahead of the raid. This is a new task force set up by the Pentagon under President Donald Trump. There's not that much information available about it. Its mission is to, dismantle Mexican cartels and cartels, particularly along the U.S.-Mexico border. I think it's important to note there have been and continue to be various interagency, Pentagon interagency cartels. And in general, what we've seen over many, many years, but accelerated under President Trump, is extensive coordination between U.S. law enforcement and the U.S. intelligence, so-called U.S. intelligence community. That's the CIA, NSA, the more than a dozen U.S. intelligence agencies. There is more coordination than ever between the law enforcement and the intelligence agency side to share information, compile information, get information, and then that is all compiled into what are called these targeting packages. There are these detailed dossiers, and that is shared with the Mexican government. That's not new. We've seen sort of these targeting packages and information sharing happening for quite some time under multiple administrations, but it is definitely accelerating under President Trump. In part, that's because of the FTO designation, the fact that President Trump, when he came into office, he directed the administration to declare various Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations, including, of course, the Jalisco New Generation cartel. That unlocks authorities within the U.S. government to use more money, more tools, more resources to get intelligence and then to share intelligence internally. We're still all, I think, trying to really understand what the impact of this FTO designation has been internally in inside the United States government, because what we can see on the surface is really just a fraction of what's happening underneath, because most of that space is classified.
It sounds like, and I can give credit where credit is due, it sounds like that is the one thing so far that we can genuinely say was good. And arguably, it's still contentious, right? Because just arbitrarily labeling people as terrorists, groups and organizations as terrorists, which is something that I also wanted to do on my website. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say, I wouldn't do that. I came up with that years ago. If we want to deal with organized crime, we need to give them an ultimatum by labeling them as terrorist organizations, saying you have 48 hours to lay down your arms or we're going to treat you like lawful combatants with the military, and you're not going to like that at all, right? So what I didn't consider is that the intelligence gathering would be more available and the ability to share that intelligence. I actually didn't consider that. I considered it more so from a direct approach. Just, you are a terrorist, the military goes after terrorists, terrorists die. And it's not going to be that simple, obviously, but with the ultimatum comes the option of, facing criminal charges and or being able to be integrated into society if you weren't at the top of the threshold, right? If you were just selling drugs on behalf of the cartel, well, we can reintegrate you into society. If you were being held at gunpoint making the drugs, we can reintegrate you into society. If you were murdering, raping, killing, slaughtering, and strong-arming, well, chances are we're not going to have a very easy time getting you into society, and you're going to probably go to prison. That being said, the information sharing is actually genuinely good. Hey, we have all this intel. Here it is. Do with it what you will. Obviously, the contention is, well, how are we gathering this information? And it sounds like it's not quite above board. And the chances of that being true are very, very fucking high. So, in that sense, I might even have to reassess the designation, or at least how it's implemented, because what I don't want is to do something that isn't above board, even if it is for the right reason, to be fair.
I'd like to bring into our discussion another guest, Alexander Avina, Associate Professor of Latin American History at Arizona State University, who's written extensively and research about capitalism, the U.S.-backed war on drugs and state violence. Professor Avina, I wanted to ask you, this enormous firepower of the cartels in this raid once again demonstrates the flood of arms that has come into Mexico from the United States. I'm wondering if you could talk about that, why these cartels are so heavily armed.
Good morning, Juan. Thank you for having me again. Yes, there's been, over the last few years, there's been sustained, really good reporting by Mexican and U.S. journalists that indicate something like 80 to 90% of the weapons that are captured from different drug trafficking organizations come from the United States. Indeed, President Sheinbaum mentioned that, I think, yesterday during her morning press conference, where she said something like 80% of the weapons that they've taken from the Jalisco cartel come from the United States. There was really excellent reporting earlier this month about one particular U.S. Army-owned ammunition plant in Lake City, Missouri, that makes the 50 caliber ammunition that is designed to take down transport and even light aircraft. And while the U.S. military does use that ammunition, it also sells it to the U.S. domestic market, but there's very little demand from the U.S. domestic market for bullets the size of cigars. So those bullets actually are being sold to Mexican drug trafficking organizations. And they're part of this broader flow of weaponry and ammunition that go from north to south that just represents one driver of the type of violence that we see in Mexico that affect everyday Mexicans on the ground.
So, the U.S. military is building concentration camps, selling weapons and ammunition to cartels, and God knows what else? Why is our military engaging in criminal enterprises? And why the fuck has this not been whistleblown? And why the fuck have heads not rolled? Like, the amount of corruption in our government that includes our military is egregious. It is egregious. And I honestly, getting elected to Congress, getting elected to the presidency, even a full sweep of Congress and House and being able to prosecute all the bad influences, clean sweep of the cabinets and directors of all the alphabet agencies, and being able to directly impact like who's in charge of the military, just really doesn't seem like it's enough at this point. Like, what part of our society and government hasn't been tainted so thoroughly that it is now part of the damn scenery? Like, isn't an integral part of its foundation? Like, is there any good left in our government and in our society? Like, is there? Because it's not looking good. And it's looking like we're going to have to do a bottom-up reset. The DMV is just horrible. Right, we can't even win with the DMV. Welcome to chat, True Steel, and I'm glad we got you some eye candy.
Yeah, and in terms of the Trump administration's repeatedly threatening President Sheinbaum, claiming her government wasn't doing enough to combat drug cartels, what's your assessment of how the Mexican government has tried to deal with this issue in the past?
Yeah, Trump has infamously said, things like he personally likes President Sheinbaum, but she's scared, and the cartels are actually running the country. Which is, I mean, as we witnessed on Sunday, that's patently false. What happened on Sunday is just part of a longer, decades-long approach to drug interdiction that is highly militarized, that focuses on punitive actions, and that in the end only ends up generating more violence and doesn't do anything to stem the flow of drugs. So I think symbolically and politically, it represents a victory for President Sheinbaum. It allows her to assert that, she's doing, quote unquote, doing something about the most powerful drug trafficking organization in Mexico and likely the Americas. It allows her to stave off some of the pressure from Trump, right, to assert Mexican military power against these criminal organizations. But we know that this is not going to do much in terms of stopping the flow of illicit drugs from Mexico into the United States. If anything, based on recent past, we know that this is probably going to lead to some sort of internal struggle within this drug trafficking organization, which will only lead to intensified violence on the ground in local communities and the places and the geographies that it controls. It will also probably embolden rival groups to try to take over territories, production zones, and smuggling routes. So that will also intensify the violence on the ground. And it's just a phenomenon of the so-called war on drugs that the U.S. has led globally since the end of World War II. The burden of this war always falls upon the very bottom of the hierarchy within this political economy, on poor people, on poor peasant farmers, on low-level street dealers, on low-level consumers. And so what we're going to see in Mexico, unfortunately, and likely, is an intensified violence on the ground, that the type that we witnessed yesterday, right? The main victims yesterday were, communities across 15 states that suffered something like 250 plus road blockages and attacks by gunmen belonging to this Jalisco cartel as a way for them to project their power and to kind of terrorize local communities into submission.
Laura Gottesdiener, your latest piece that just came out today for Reuters talks about the cartel and perhaps others putting out fake news accounts of what's taking place right now, the reaction in Mexico. You're contending making it look worse than it is to the attack.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. I completely agree with Alex. I think the roadblocks, the disturbances, have a dramatic impact on communities across the country. There is also, at the same time, a propaganda effort of both these roadblocks, but in the digital space. That's what we were looking at late last night. Because at this point, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel wants to try to create a narrative that the Mexican government is not in control of the country. There are certainly parts of the country in which the state really does struggle to assert control, provide basic functions, and particularly security. But their goal is beyond that. They want to create, especially in the context of the World Cup, especially in the context of widespread tourism to Mexico, they want to create an international image that there is, that they have more control of the country, or that the Mexican government is unable to govern, essentially a crisis of governability. And so what we were looking at last night is the way in which AI-generated images and fake news spread across the internet. According to researchers, that was not just unsuspecting people sharing sort of stories to get clicks, but it appears that that was actually part of some version of a coordinated propaganda campaign by organized crime to create this additional space in which they are fighting for the narrative. The roadblocks were very real disturbances in which they are fighting for the narrative on the streets, but online they were also fighting for the narrative of this question of who governs the country. And so I think we have to really look at this online space, especially now that AI has become so incredibly ubiquitous, and understand, what are crime groups doing in this space and how it is a new terrain of struggle, of propaganda and narrative struggle for them. They've used social media for various tactical communication reasons, fake recruiting for quite some time. But this is sort of, it appears that this is sort of an escalation of the propaganda war that they wage online.
So, the cartels are also evolving with the times. They're outfitted like U.S. Special Forces. They're being sold to by U.S. Special Forces. And they're also waging war like, oh, crazy, the South African and Pakistani bot rage bait accounts on Twitter, which we also discovered is the majority of right-wing extremism in America as well. So, granted, the cartels has, in my opinion, has very little to do with American policy. That's a Mexico problem that we suffer from because of the drug trade. But again, shoring up the border, closing the border, and then terrorizing immigrants in America to deal with drug trade, when you have a complicit military base selling weapons and ammunition to them, like, if you really want to stop the drug flows into America, evidently we have to start looking at our own military. But suffice to say, that's what's going on in Mexico.
بقت يعني حياتنا الحمد لله طبيعية، بس الحين في الوقت هذا بعد ما دمروا الاحتلال بيتنا هينا نلتحف الأرض ونلتحف السماء، هينا قاعدين نقعد نجهز فطور، نقعد فوق سطح البيت المدمر. يعني أسرتنا الحين في وضع صعب، والحين السفرة مش زي سفرة زمان. بقى الوقت زمان قبل الحرب بقت السفرة الحمد لله كل ما لذ وطاب. الحين يعني دوبنا اللي بيعطونا إياه تعين التكيات، عايشين على اللي بيعطونا إياه أهل الخير. هي عامل خيمة أنا وأسرتي وأخواتي كلهم مفرقين، كل واحد في خيمة برا الشيخ رضوان، يعني كلهم في خيم إخواتي. يعني تشتتنا كنا، الأسرة تشتتت، بقينا في رمضان نبقى أسرة واحدة قاعدين متجمعين مع بعض حوالين بعض دائما. الحين تفرقنا، يعني الواحد بشوف أخوه صار كل 10-15 يوم لما يشوف أخوه. بعد ما وقفت الحرب لحتى الآن لا صار إعمار ولا صار حاجة، وإحنا حتى الآن في البهدلة، ويعني الأمانة عايشين عيشة صعبة. أنا بناشد العالم كله إنه يعني يعجلوا في مسيرة الإعمار حتى نعيش زي باقي الأمة.
Don't miss out.
This is the part that really kills me about the Palestinian situation, right? the Palestinians believe that the world will actually unite to help them. And that gives the Palestinians hope. Because the Palestinians intrinsically believe in the goodness of other cultures, other countries, other governments. That they truly believe that if they comply with Israel's demands and keep their head down and try to do whatever it is that they are told, that they will eventually be given the right back to live their lives. And that belief is probably one of the only things keeping them alive right now. And what kills me the most about that belief is that it is an entire fabrication. The world does not care about Palestine. The world is actively engaging in turning the Gaza Strip, which we saw for ourselves is a comparatively small strip of land on the map, into a luxury resort where they will live in a prison city, if they're even in Gaza when that's built. And listening to these people have hope and trying to appeal to the goodness of governments outside of their region, and me knowing full well that they are holding on to false hope and making appeals to people who do not fucking care, fills me with so much more rage and sorrow than I can possibly convey in the English language. The Palestinians are going to be starved to death, sicked to death, exposed to death. They're going to be corralled into a city, and they're still going to be wondering, are we going to get our homes back? And they're going to be fed just enough lies to say, oh yes, this is temporary. Oh no, now this is temporary. I am glad that the Palestinian people haven't had their spirits broken, but it isn't far away. And it's disturbing that the rest of the world watches these things, listens to these people cry out with their very generous hearts. Please help us. Please get this thing moving along. I haven't seen my family in weeks, months. I've buried however many. And we just don't care. Collectively, as a people, we just don't give a damn. It's not worth our interest. It's not worth our time. Look at this. 640 views from a 17.1 million subscriber channel. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. 640 views, 17.1 million channel. It's soul-crushing to keep covering Palestine. It's soul-crushing. And it's soul-crushing not because of what's happening to the Palestinians, which is bad. It's soul-crushing because I know intrinsically that our government and world governments are going to do nothing and are in fact working together to turn Palestine, to the Gaza Strip, into a luxury resort. We know they don't want to reconstruct. We know for a fact the rest of the world wants to turn the Gaza Strip into a luxury resort, a technocratic utopia. And all the Palestinian people want is their homes back, their lives back, despite 2 years of genocide. I cannot stress how much I despise the systems I live under. I mean, felt that. It's why I'm so angry about that guy who asked me if I believe that fake country is committing apartheid. No, exactly. And you should be angry. I'm angry on your behalf. And I'm so glad that what little bit of ignorance I do here at my own workplace is extremely limited, and I can tell them to leave my fucking office. I have an ounce of privilege at my job, so I can be like, listen, take that shit out of here. Or I will shut it down because I have authority. There's just too much ignorance and apathy in the world. And it kills me that so much of it is directed towards what's happening in Gaza, because their lives, their days are literally numbered, and they are being counted in dollars and cents by the very people who should be liberating them. Cuba?
2 Navy vessels carrying humanitarian aid to Cuba set sail from Mexico. The shipments are loaded with powdered milk, beans, and other non-perishable goods. A month into the White House campaign to force regime change by blocking crude oil from reaching the island, Mexico is emerging as Cuba's most reliable partner. The Trump administration is threatening to impose tariffs on anyone who supplies Cuba with fuel. But President Claudia Sheinbaum says her government is determined to stop a worsening humanitarian crisis on the island. Her government has halted oil shipments, but she says food and medical aid will continue, calling it a humanitarian obligation.
Let me make this clear. We do not agree with the imposition of tariffs on countries selling oil to Cuba, but we will continue helping the Cuban people in other ways.
She's even calling on the Mexican population to join the effort. Across the country, Mexicans have been dropping off food and other basic supplies at collection points.
Es simbólico, es importante.
Mexico is showing its solidarity, but we must not fool ourselves. It's a symbolic act and doesn't help the real problem on the island and its long-term solution.
The aid is also helping.
The long-term solution being ending the blockade and embargo on Cuba by America and the rest of the fucking world. Or rather, America and the rest of the world is too fucking afraid to do anything about it.
Mexico's president placate factions within her own party, ideologically aligned with Havana and uneasy about concessions she's made to Washington. Mexico and Cuba's ties date back centuries. In fact, it was from here, the state of Veracruz, that in 1956, a boat carrying Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, then young aspiring revolutionaries, left for Cuba.
They invoked the names Che Guevara and Fidel Castro. Say their names.
Cuba, in what marked the beginning of the Cuban Revolution. Mexico has played a balancing act since the revolution, maintaining close ties to Cuba without angering the United States. Now, with the Trump administration seeking to reassert its influence in the region, that balancing act is more delicate than ever. Julia Galliano, Al Jazeera, Veracruz, Mexico.
Ugh. Well, the good news is that Mexico is standing by their territorial, regional allies. And honestly, there's no reason. Why the fuck are we terrorizing Cuba? Again, extremely small country that is of absolute zero threat to the United States, economically, militarily, or socially. And you know what? If the threat is that communism works, then why don't you make capitalism better? Seriously. If you're so fucking worried that seeing communism in action is going to make people turn their backs on capitalism, then maybe make capitalism better. Crazy fucking thought, right? But what do I know? I'm just running for Congress. What is this? Gorton and Denton. What's with this?
For decades, Gorton Market has been part of the fabric.
Bro. Am I having connectivity issues or something?
For decades, Gorton Market has been part of the fabric of this neighbourhood in Manchester. Over the years, it's changed, rebuilt as an indoor marketplace, its existence dependent on the trust of the community. Much like politics, that trust can't be taken for granted. And in this solid Labour seat, faith in politics has worn thin.
They promise you things you never get. And I just wish they would all pull together and do something good, rather than all argue with each other.
I know it's got worse. What we need is more localisation to bring unity, to bring prosperity, to bring hope and, let's say, a more sustainable future.
Listening to voters, it's clear that Labour can't assume anything here. It's long been a dominant force here, but now it's facing stiff competition from the left, the Greens, from the right, Reform UK, with some communities questioning whether the party really represents them anymore. Labour may have...
Hold on. The Labour Party is no longer the left? Wasn't the Labour Party the left as you could get in the UK? And now they're the moderate party? Like, that should just tell you everything you need to know about being co-opted.
Represented this area for generations, but this is a diverse constituency. At Manchester's Central Mosque, some say their support is shifting, shaped by both local concerns and national politics. And in an area where 30% of the population is Muslim, they represent a pivotal voice.
It makes us want to think about where we want to take our vote, if we want to put our vote in this box or that box, because we don't really know who's standing for us or who's standing against us.
We do pay taxes, we are here legally, we have paid our hard-earned money to be here.
Recent opinion polls suggest a much closer contest than in the past, with the left-wing Green Party gaining support among younger, ethnically diverse voters, and right-wing Reform UK being backed by those from majority white working-class backgrounds. For many voters, this election is less about party loyalty and more about whether they feel heard. The result could reveal how strong Labour's traditional support base remains and what that could mean for the future of British politics.
They always bring up white middle-class workers feeling like they've been heard, as if they aren't the dominant force in their own country. And I'm really sick and tired of listening about white mediocre people's feelings getting hurt or not, or whether or not they're heard, because it's immediately followed up with, well, if white people's feelings are hurt, then we have to go after brown people to make their feelings better. No, racism is not the answer. If mediocrity in whiteness is not enough to get you through in a country that benefits you for being white and mediocre, then the problem is you, not society. That's the problem. Complacency and rewarding mediocrity. That's the problem. That sense of entitlement is what needs to go. You should have a sense of community, of building, of working together, of elevating others around you, and even, yes, past and above you. And until we get that into our core belief system and a society, we will continue to deteriorate. Now, granted, I'm talking about America, but the same is true for the UK. A society that does not respect itself and does not embrace its diversity will crumble and fall, holding on to its privilege. And that's all there is to it. All right. What else do we got? Oh my God. This story. Just look at that fucking title. Cuban border guards shoot dead 4 people on U.S. registered speedboat. All of these headlines are extremely leading, extremely biased. As if Cuba just opened fire on Americans for no fucking reason. The actual story, whether or not they actually cover it this way, is that 4 Florida men were on a boat, encountered Cuban military, and fired upon them. And got. So let's see if the BBC will be honest about it.
Now, the authorities in Cuba say its Coast Guard has shot dead 4 people traveling in a U.S.-registered speedboat in an exchange of fire off the coast. Now, it comes amid heightened tensions between the U.S. and the communist state, with Donald Trump enforcing a near-total blockade of the island. Well, Sarah Smith has more details live in Washington for us now. Sarah, what more do we know about all this?
Well, we know, as you say, that 4 people were killed and the speedboat they were on was registered in the United States. We don't know yet if they were American citizens, and that is fairly crucial. The information we've got came in a statement from the Cuban government, who said that a boat had been detected inside Cuban territorial waters and that when it was approached by border guards asking for identification, the crew on the speedboat opened fire. Well, the border guards obviously returned fire because the statement goes on to say that 4 of the aggressors on the foreign vessel were killed. We know that 6 other people were injured as well, who were then evacuated and treated for their injuries. This is particularly sensitive, and even more so if they were American citizens who were killed, because there are volatile relations between the United States and Cuba at the moment. The US has actually blocked all oil shipments from Venezuela to Cuba, and that has created a real fuel crisis on the island. And the Florida Attorney General, who also wants to know more about this, has said today that they're launching an inquiry because the Cuban government can't be trusted on this. And he said these communists need to be held to account.
So the BBC has about as much credibility as the Trump administration, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not going to say that the BBC is always trash, but it's like listening to Fox News and CBS from time to time. It's pretty frustrating listening to them and exactly how they reported it. Allegedly, they might be American citizens, and if so, that might be a problem. But don't worry, the Americans are calling the dirty commies out, and that's what we're going to tell the story of. Not the fact that 4 people that were on a registered vessel from America, probably Americans, definitely Americans, fired upon Cuban military for no fucking reason. What's worse is it could be implied that these guys were drug traffickers themselves, which is why they would even fire upon without thinking twice about it. That they were military maybe, or clandestine, something or another. Like, normal people don't bring guns on a joyride, let alone entering into another country's territorial waters, which wouldn't even be an easy thing to do. Okay, so here's Florida. Here's Florida. You'd have to be from Key West to get to Cuba. Now, I don't know. What's the mileage here? Let's see. What if... Uh-oh. I got lost at sea. Key West. So, the Hemingway Museum... Okay, obviously we're not talking... No boat, no distance? Okay. Oh, here we go. 2,000 feet? That can't be fucking right. 1 mile. 2 miles. 10 miles. So, okay, I guess Cuba is a lot closer than I was expecting. 20 miles per inch. Okay. So, oh wait, I guess I'm in the wrong, there you go. It looks like well, that is an inch, right? Yeah, okay, so from Key West to there would be about 4 inches, 4¼ inches. So that's literally 80 miles on a speedboat. Okay. What is the travel range of a high-quality speedboat? Oh, shit, okay, sweet. I guess on a speedboat you really could go to Cuba and back. All right, fuck it. I didn't think that was the case, actually. Sweet. So, and honestly, then I guess you could go from the tip of Florida, like the Everglades, Key Largo. What's this? Miami, maybe? Miami might be a stretch. That's closer to 200-300 miles, which I guess is still a possibility, but yachts can hit 300 plus. Speedboats, 350 nautical miles. Still, right? Like, that's not your typical joyride, and you're still not going with guns and rifles and shit like that. And if you accidentally end up in Cuba, the first response for a regular person is not to open fire. So, lots and lots and lots and lots of questions to be had there. Oh, here we go. Maybe a better news. Or take, I should say.
Cuba saying it's killed 4 people aboard an American speedboat and injuring 6 others. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Breaking news at this hour. The Cuban embassy in the United States saying that Cuban troops opened fire on the speedboat that they say was detected in Cuba's territorial waters. The vessel, actually registered in Florida, is said to have been about a mile from Cuba. Our contributor and retired Colonel Steve Gagnon joins me now. Clearly, we're just reading in, getting more information. But
let's be sure to speculate that those dirty fucking commies killed our people for no goddamn reason.
Getting details. What are your first thoughts?
First of all, we can't trust anything that the Cubans say. So if they say it was only a mile offshore, then that opens questions like what was that speedboat doing there, because it was within the 12 nautical mile legal limit of sovereign territory of Cuba. If it was outside of 12 miles and this happened, which we will be able to probably determine, then that is something very, very different, and that becomes a very big diplomatic incident. So 4 people dead, 6 people injured. That's about the only thing we can trust. The Cubans say that the U.S. boat fired first on the Cuban boat. Hard to believe that, but we need to wait and see how close they were actually, and that will determine how big a deal this actually becomes.
And we're being very careful with the language here, because we're saying an American speedboat. We're not saying that Americans were killed. We don't know yet. I don't think we can confirm, right, if they were Americans or not. Okay, so clearly this is fallout from the capture of Maduro.
Yeah, it's fallout in the sense that the Cubans are very nervous. So remember when we took Maduro and we said that we're going to control Venezuelan oil, we said 60% of your daily requirement of oil, Cuba, is no longer going to come to you from Venezuela. And so you think about a cut of that much oil that keeps the lights on is eventually going to crush the Cuban economy. The Cubans know this. They know that the White House has said very clearly that they want regime change in Havana. So it's a matter of time before the economy collapses and something has to give. So very, very nervous, and so you can see that they may be on guard. But at this point, there's no reason to think that this was deliberate or something done by the United States government. Smuggling happens back and forth between Cuba and Florida all the time. So a lot of questions here. We can't really determine anything, but we do know that the Cubans are very nervous about the U.S. pushing the regime to collapse.
Got it.
See what I mean? It's straight up propaganda. Those dirty commies, but we'll say in their defense that they are pretty scared because America is putting what for and threatening their very stability. So, dirty commies, but, maybe it was just drug cartels. I absolutely despise the fact that it is incredibly difficult to get credible information anymore, even from syndicated news networks, right? Because you get this filth every single fucking time. So let's say we duplicate this. And this decides to freeze on me again. Like my internet has, it spikes high and it takes longer to load. I don't get that. All right, so NBC6 Florida.
Hey guys, a big breaking story here that we are following out of Cuba. It's a deadly confrontation that happened on Cuban waters. Cuban-run TV, they went on the air today that said earlier this morning, this February morning, there was a boat, a vessel registered to Florida that was detected in Cuban territorial waters. They said it was specifically detected within 1 nautical mile of the Villa Clara province. For some perspective, that's a...
Okay, Vacla province. Is that going to show me anything on this map? Because I have no idea where Vacla province is. And it does not look like this map shows that pretty easily. And what? I am so off base. What the fuck? Oh, Vacla? Did I not pronounce? I did. Vacla province. What the fuck? Vacla? Are you serious? Maybe she's pronouncing it wrong.
central region of the island that borders the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, wait. Cayos Falcones. We can figure this out based on the fuck? You have a random ass picture on the bottom here of nothing then. What the hell? What is that even supposed to be? Whatever.
To the north, of course. Okay, so again, I'm checking my notes to make sure we get this 100% accurate. This is according to Cuba's news agency. They say that Cuba's Coast Guard vessel, there were 5 people aboard of that vessel. They approached that vessel that was registered to Florida. One of the occupants on the American registered boat opened fire on the Cuban forces and injured the commander of the Cuban vessel. Now, Cuba State TV, they said this afternoon that 4 people on board the Florida registered vessel, 4 people were killed and 6 others were injured. They said that those who were injured did receive medical attention. Cuban officials say they have the right to protect their territorial waters and to protect their sovereignty. Obviously, there's a lot here that's developing. NBC6, we have reached out to the U.S. State Department to confirm details of what exactly happened here. But a developing story, of course, Cuba's facing one of the worst crises. Health, of course, economic.
And now we go into Cuba's being embargoed because they're evil commies. So there were 10 people on the boat. Okay. How big does a speedboat have to be to handle 10 people? Between 24 and 35 feet in length. Okay, so 10-passenger boat. I mean, look at that. I'm just saying, like, if that's a 10-passenger boat, when does a yacht... Okay. How large is the smallest classification of yacht? 26 to 33 feet. And this is 28 feet. So these are yachts. You need to have a yacht in order to get 10 people on it. And they made it to Cuba somewhere along this is all Cuba, so I don't know where they got, but they got somewhere. I'm guessing... Oh, wait. Oh, here we go. That's what it was. Okay. You had to really zoom in. They made it to here. From somewhere in Miami, which was about 80 nautical miles. Give or take, I don't know. I really don't know how to read the miles on this map, but that makes more sense. So they made it to around here. Around here. Before they got. On a boat that probably looked like this. And 6 of their dudes are injured and 4 of them be dead. That honestly sounds like some sort of drug activity to me. And there's so very little information to go out about it. You see what I'm saying? And all of the reporting is Cuba is communist. They're state-run media. As if this isn't state media. Okay. But it does seem that that's pretty much it. Oh, France. Let's see if France... Nope, does not look like they're going to give a better tell about it either. Shocking. Well, you know what? That's as good a place as any to end the stream. Communisty be the very big threat to capitalism. Very scary, yeah. I don't know what's going on in the world anymore, right? We got, well, I do know what's going on in the world, and that's what makes everything so frustrating. Suffice to say, that's our stream. We did not get to end on a high note today, unfortunately. I apologize. There aren't too many high notes out there to end on, as it turns out. That being said, I do hope you enjoyed the stream. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel and all of these social platforms right here, because I am your next congressional candidate, or your next congressman, and your next president, right? So I will see you tomorrow, Thursday, at 7 o'clock sharp. If I'm not late, that is. And we will do our recap, and hopefully we are not at war with Iran. So that would be really good news if we are not at war. So, on that note, Samuel Ronan, your future president, your future congressman, out.